this room. Woo! Okay, so for those of you in the back, if you can make your way forward, go for it. Welcome to crazy Las Vegas. Woo! It is really a busy time, as you know. So, all right. So I'm Sue Mitchell, and I'm the CEO of Mitchell Stankovic and Associates, and I'd love to welcome you all to the Underground. Thank you for coming. Thank you. I've tried to get around and meet most of you, shake your hand, say hello, but please do that right now. Turn to your colleagues that are sitting by you and just say hello. Make sure you know everybody. Okay, I knew I'd lose control right away. All right, so a few kind of housekeeping things. This room is called the Prestige Room, and it used to be a private gaming room for the hotel. And we're actually the first event. It's been fun, it's interesting. If the walls could talk, I'm hearing all stuff. So enjoy yourself. The layout, just make your way around. We're going to, as you know, for those of you that have been part of the Underground, we keep the pace moving pretty quickly here. So, get up, move. We've got food, so you can just have some fun with it. All right? Well, none of this is possible, and I just for a minute, I want to change mics. And I want to just acknowledge a few folks. First thing I'd like to do is, where's Zach? Zach, okay. Everybody say hi to Zach and thank him for all his work. All right. And standing next to Zach is Mike Stankovic, my partner. All right, and then we have some wonderful volunteers, and sometimes we forget that none of this works unless all of us come together. So LaTanya's here. Deja's back there, I see her. Cynthia's here. Oh, Cynthia. And Espy's here. Thank you very much. And to our partners, AACUC, all right, Renee. Alchemy, Stephen, yes. Balance, Cynthia. All right, Co-op, CUNA Mutual, Connecta. All right, Origins, Prodigy, QCash, Certec, your marketing company, and Zest. And if you can believe it or not, she's never been to an Underground before. We get very busy, but one of the things I wanted to just say to everybody, as part of this industry, we are so blessed with partners that help us. And sometimes we look at those as vendors or sponsors or things like that. I really believe without our partners, we wouldn't be who we are. So I wanted to start there. And as I go through the process, we're going to have an interesting agenda today. We're going to have, you've got it there on your desk, on your chairs. We're going to have panel after panel, and we're going to encourage discussion with the group around you when we get to that different levels. And then we're going to welcome the president and CEO from Poland, Rafał. So. He's come all the way here to talk to us, and so we're pretty excited about that. And then we're going to have a reception unlike any other. All right, music, we're going to move around. We've got balloons where people will be standing, musical chairs, and we'll go from there. All right? Are we ready? Yeah. All right, I like the energy. I hope it continues, y'all. All right, let's keep it going. So, the underground is one of a kind. And what makes it one of a kind is that we like to hear from our colleagues, our friends, the people that know what's going on, the people within the industry. I love to hear from speakers. I love to read new books. I love that whole experience. But more importantly, I love to see the action that's going on right now. And so today and tomorrow, we're going to hear from people in a totally different way. We're going to hear from them from the standpoint of best practices, things you might want to think about, and maybe some challenges. But we're really going to push forward on that. So, Money 2020. This was crazy. I don't know. I look at this and I say to myself, okay, so this is a busy time. But we're talking about money here. What? Somebody told me the number's up to about 10,000 people are here to talk about money. And so we're here to create a buzz, and we have our friends with us. This recording is going to be broadcast out later, probably tomorrow or the next day. And so we're going to have the opportunity to continue to share it. So make some noise. Make sure that the people at Money 2020 know credit unions are in the house. All right? Okay, now I'd like to, I'm going to ask Jeff Yanamura to come up, but I want to tell you a special story. Underground has been a part of our world for a few years now, and we've really never had a credit union step forward and say, hey, we want to participate. We would like to see other board members there. We'd like to talk a little bit with what's going on and budgets and funding and all the things that are happening. And so Connecta stepped up and asked if they could be part of it. So I want you to welcome Jeff Yanamura, their chair, to the Underground.
Thanks, Sue. First of all, I don't think I can match her energy. I don't know how she does it. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeff Yanamura. I'm the board chair for Connecta Federal Credit Union. We're honored and pleased to be co-sponsors of this Underground Collision with Mitchell Stankovic. Let me say a little bit about why it was important for Connecta to be part of this critical conversation. In 2020, I was a panelist for an underground that was in Washington, D.C., where the topic was Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I see some nodding heads. We talked a lot about the various levels of well-being, and my panel in particular, we spoke about the whole self, the physical, the mental, the emotional, and financial well-being of our members. Then we traveled home to the pandemic, right? That shut us down, but that made the authentic conversation about Maslow's hierarchy even more important. And what I learned from that is that it's important for us to continue to grow as leaders. When Sue first talked to us about her concept for the Underground here in Vegas, she talked about the desire to talk about technology and the realities therefrom. And so we raised our hand and said, we want to be part of that. These are important conversations for directors to have. Boards have the opportunity to set policies that bring the well-being to our members, just like we did in the early days of the credit union movement. but we also have to be modern and relevant and to keep pace with the members' needs of tomorrow. Sorry. So as directors, we look to be strategically curious, to be forward-thinking, and we need this to help guide our credit unions to serve our members in new ways and revitalize the helping people mission. And that's what we'll be talking about the next 2 days. So on behalf of my colleagues that are here that made the trip, Suzanne Curtin, our vice chair, our treasurer, Paul James, our board secretary, Ronnie Crichton, and our board member, Mark Byrne, want to thank all of you for attending today and this weekend. And with that, I'll turn it over back to Sue.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much. And again, thank you to everybody that's here. So, are we ready? All right, let's do this. We're going to invite our first panel up. I'm going to ask Brian to come up. Brian is, I'm going to just tell you a little story. He and I got on the phone and we started brainstorming what's happening with CUNA Mutual and Ventures Group and so on. And in that conversation, he just told me that it's really changing. The world's changing out there. And all of a sudden, we were off and running. So Ventures Group, funding, looking at the future with fintech. So he's going to lead the panel. And then we want to have Jennifer, if you will. She's a CEO at SCE Credit Union, but more importantly, she's a leader who wants to push forward. She wants to make it happen. And I just, I love the way she's doing that. If you could look at her to-do list, okay, we'd all go home, all right? It's crazy. Okay, and then our very own Tony Patel. Tony, come on up. And most of you know, Origins, and if anything, he's been helping us with income and making sure credit unions have bottom lines and looking ahead to the future in so many ways. So he's going to do that with us. And then Chris from Constellation. Come on up, Chris. And he's innovating the member experience with partners throughout the industry. So their title, welcome. The title of their panel is, ROI or Oh My. So I'll turn it over to you, Brian.
Well, thank you so much, Susan. Great to see everybody here. Kind of felt like the price is right. Chris Kovacs, come on down. You're the next contestant. Well, great to be here. A couple weeks ago, I fractured some ribs. So if you hear me either groan or utter some profanities, it's either I moved wrong or Chris said something that I disagree with. But we'll kick things off.
Very possible.
Very possible. So I want to start with a little quote here. Then we'll guess maybe who said this. Hint, he's a CEO from a small bank in New York City. Absolutely, we should be scared shitless about fintechs. Oh, someone's heard this already. Yes, well, maybe others in here. We just have to get quicker, better, faster. I expect to see very, very tough, brutal competition in the next 10 years. Someone uttered the person who said that. Say that a little bit louder. Jamie Dimon, our buddy from JP Morgan Chase. The guy who, I feel sorry, he only has a tech budget that's twice the size of the credit union industry combined, and so I really feel for him. But I think he sees something that, many of us that have been kind of living and breathing fintech for the last 6, 7, 8 years is that I do think that competition, is going to be brutal. It already is starting to become brutal as fintechs start to gain market share and big banks spend billions and billions and billions of dollars. And guess what? They're going after your members. And they're not going to let up. It's not going to get any easier. So, kind of in the spirit of Halloween, I thought I would start out with some spooky facts and statistics here. Funding for fintechs last year exceeded $130 billion. Anyone want to guess what the tech budget is for the credit union industry combined? It's less than $130 billion. It's $6 billion. So $6 billion versus $130 billion dollars. You can do a lot with that money, and they do a lot. They burn through a lot of money, except some of our portfolio companies. Chris, you guys do a great job there. Another scary fact: the number of fintechs in North America now outnumber credit unions 2 to 1. There's about 10,000 fintech companies in North America now. And credit unions are about 5,000. Now I think we're heading into a rough market. My guess is we'll see that number actually maybe decrease by a little bit, but the fact is there's a lot of companies out there. Fintechs have knocked credit unions out as the number one lender for unsecured personal loans. So fintechs back in 2010 had about 1% market share. Credit unions were the largest issuer back in 2010 of unsecured consumer loans. Today, fintechs have just shy of 50% market share. And guess what? There are more fintechs now that are hungry for other loans. Just take a look at SoFi, and they now are kind of a full-service bank, if you will. Now my screen just went blank, so now I'll have to try to remember some of these off the top of my head. Anyone know the Jeopardy theme song music? Oh, you guys are good. All right, I'm back in business. Back in business here. Couple of other things. Again, I don't want to make this all doom and gloom, but I do want to kind of drive home the point that the world's changing really fast. A couple of things. The big banks I mentioned, they're pumping billions into their tech budgets. The 5 big banks, again, all spend more individually than credit unions combined. And then I think what maybe is also pretty concerning is what some of these major retailers are looking to do. You look at Walmart. There's just an announcement that came out about 2 weeks ago in the paper. I don't know if you all saw it, but they're partnering with a fintech to provide checking accounts. And they're going to start by offering checking accounts to their 1.6 million employees within the next 12 months, and then after that, roll it out to the general public. That's not good. Apple partnered with Goldman Sachs, launched the Apple Card. Amazon's partnered with Affirm to provide buy now, pay later financing. So you got big retailers getting in the mix now as well. So I've been really, like I said, in the fintech space for about 7 years now, talking to credit union leaders. I can say, quite honestly, back in 2016, 2017, I tried to sound some alarm bells, and I think the industry, for the most part, was very dismissive. I think a lot of credit union leaders kind of thought of fintechs as 2 guys operating out of their mom's basement, and they weren't too concerned. Credit unions say we provide best-in-class services to our members, and we can hang our hat on that. And I now am kind of beyond the point of raising alarm bells, and there are some credit unions out there doing an amazing job in terms of working with fintechs. But if you're sitting on the sidelines, if you're not concerned about it, I mean, this sort of is a plea really to get off the sidelines, get proactive, because every day, every month, every year that passes, we're going to fall further and further behind as an industry from where the big banks and where the fintechs and where those large retailers are going. So we're going to have a lively discussion here, I hope. But we're going to turn things over. And Jen, you want to provide some opening comments here?
Well, the headline was to be scary, and I'm not that scary. I don't know. But anyway, we just had our planning session yesterday with our board of directors, and we talked about the amount of work and the amount of lift that really has to take place in the organization in order for us to even become a part of this, even catch up a little bit, right? But then we talk about the escalation of the speed. It's going to get even faster. And that's what keeps me up at night is how do we adapt that fast, right? Are we really thinking ahead? I have a 16-year-old daughter. I've already lost her as a customer because we're not providing the services that she wants. I make her use an credit union account, and then she goes, "Oh, this app is terrible. I can't do anything with it. Can I have that Venmo credit card I want, that Venmo debit card attached to my transactions?" I'm like, "No, you can't have it." but she's still asking for it. That and a puppy, but she can't have that either. But it's really about the speed and the next generation. Is our value proposition enough? You talked about service. We talked yesterday about access and service. Those are table stakes. I mean, that's just the basic stuff just to even be in existence. Where we can really shine is our value proposition, but it doesn't really truly connect with our next market. We were talking, was it the Generation Alpha now? I don't know.
I'll know that. After Gen Z is Gen Alpha.
So I don't know about Gen Alpha, but I do know that the marketplace is definitely changing, the demands. When we look at our product stock, we still have CDs, right? We have these money market accounts that pay very little in dividends. Are those really the products and services that this next generation wants? I'm going to guess not. I'm going to find it very hard to sell a CD to my 16-year-old daughter for her to understand that. So what are we doing to really innovate our offering and our product line and really to connect with this next generation? That's pretty scary.
Great. Next.
Tony, yes.
All
You're
right.
next.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you all. I just got in this morning. I got up at 4 o'clock this morning and took a flight over here from Orange County. And I wasn't as smart as Aaron Mendez and paid for my early check-in. So I thought I would change a little bit, but this is what I flew in today. And they just text me, my room's available, so I'm going to run right out and get it. But it's great seeing everybody. At Origins, we really focus on helping credit unions make more loans and improve your efficiencies. That's our focus. And hopefully we've helped you do that over the years. This year we're going to do over $75 billion in funded loans, or helping credit unions do that, let's just say. And I would just echo Brian's, fears a little bit, but also I think Brian's, over the last 10 years, CUNA Mutual's really helped us understand that fintechs kind of need us more than we need them in many ways. And I think partnering with them is definitely an option that I would encourage credit unions to do. But I think doing it in a group is better than doing it by themselves. I just finished my board planning session, and I think I have Aaron Mendez and Bill Cheney here on my board, and I used the theme, do we want to continue to hunt together? And I think our chairman, Jim LaFoon, coined this phrase that he'd rather hunt together than hunt alone, and I think you'll be much more successful that way. I think that's what we need to do too in working with fintechs is work with them to hunt together, but as a group of credit unions. I don't think one credit union is going to make a fintech successful. The ways that we can do that today, we're integrating Zest AI. I think they're here into our platform. Informed IQ is another one for back office processing. So I think trying to do that is going to be more successful. I don't think there is many of them to compete against us today. There's a few. He mentioned SoFi. They didn't need credit unions. They've done a very good job of competing against us. But for the most part, a lot of the fintechs need us more than we need them. And I think they strategically partnering with them and investing in them. The other thing I would just say on that is if, hopefully Chris and myself, Origins and the co-op and other big CUSOs out there are helping credit unions stay relevant, and owning and controlling your delivery channels, I think, is more important. In the fintech world, the one thing I worry a bit about is as we do invest in them, they're looking for one thing, and that's some kind of event. You know, and that may or may not be good for you in the long run. And I just think that we need to, if we can, try to own 50+% of these QSOs that we're starting in ways that we can own and control our delivery channels. And again, I really am looking forward to see Chris's company mature and scale up. And I know you guys got a lot of good stuff going on, but that is a very high cost area for credit unions. Mobile banking is, if you guys didn't know what he does, that's his that's his gig.
One of the things.
One of the things, but main thing, and it's a very expensive thing, right? For credit unions, and you're able to manage that and control that, I think, in a much more effective way. So I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you, sir. I guess I'm going to throw the fireballs then, guys? Is that what's going to happen? Okay. I also have a 16-year-old, a son, and who was already a credit union member. And I walked him into a credit union because he needed a check card because he's going to start driving and he needs to buy gas. So I said, okay, well, we're going to go online and we're going to open you up an account, son. He's already got a savings. We're just going to open a checking. Couldn't do it online. Had to go to the branch. Took 45 minutes for him to open a checking account at a branch. Now, this credit union, like others, really touts that we give service, right? And if I was going to throw a fireball, I would say, strip yourself of the thinking that that makes a difference anymore. Because the way you've been accustomed to delivering service is to a customer group that is different than the one you're trying to recruit. So after 45 minutes of service, we walk out of the branch, and he looks at me and says, took me 5 minutes to open my account on Coinbase on my phone. You guys have a lot of work to do, right? So what's interesting about that, though, is then he got a check. And I said, great, you got a checking account? Go on the app, download it. Not ours. Go down, download the app, sign up to use it, and deposit your check. And he said, Dad, they're going to send me a code, but it's going to go to a phone number that looks like our old home phone number. Oh, so in 45 minutes of service, we didn't confirm his mobile number. What? So I said to him, you got to call the call center, right? Right? So what's happening in fintech world, and where I think we as credit unions, and I am a credit union person through and through, like this is my 30th year in credit unions, guys. I did in fact start when I was 17. And I bleed credit union, whatever that color is, right? What we've got to do is understand that it's about convenience, right? Whether it's Uber opening up checking accounts and debit accounts, or it's Walmart, or it's Amazon, it's about meeting the consumer, the member of the future, where they are. They are not in your branch. They are not on your website. You've got to meet them where they are. And mobile is going to become super, super important, even more so than it is today. The reality is that the fintechs who are out there, who will be banks soon, right? And banks will become fintechs as well. They're not inventing anything new. They're taking things that we've had for 20 years and just like a Rubik's Cube, changing them around and saying, oh, you want a credit builder card. This is what Tom does. You want a credit builder card. Great. How about a card that you swipe and then it transfers the balance from your checking account? It's called a charge card, folks. We've had that for a long time. American Express does that transfer once a month. They just do it immediately following the charge. Same tools are there. What we've got to think about is meeting the consumer where they are, really understanding that next generation of credit union consumer, meeting them where they are, and then using the services that we know very, very well to provide them with good experiences later on.
Very well said, all by all three of you. Thanks. Well, let's jump into the Q&A portion. And again, if there are questions from the audience, please just shout them out. Tony, you kind of said, hey, fintechs need credit unions more than credit unions need them. So true or false? I mean, can credit unions build most of the technology offered by fintechs better, faster, and cheaper?
I would venture to say that fintechs are our innovation labs. You know, I think they are ones that can think and do things faster than we can. And you know, we've got good ideas too, and I think we've built some QSOs over the years on it, but they're just so much faster at it and can execute. So I do think working with them as partners and looking to them as the innovators, I think is a good way to go.
Yeah, Chris or Jed, anything to add to that?
I was just going to say, they're not bound by the thinking that we've had, right, for the last 10, 15, 20, or in some cases 30 years, right? They don't have the same preconceived notions. They don't have the same mental frameworks for assessing problems, right? So what a fintech gives you the ability to do is to take a whole new look at the opportunity in business. There are fintechs that we work with because we operate in this horizon between credit unions and fintechs, right? And there's credit unions we work with, and I'm like, how the hell did you figure that out, right? We've known about that problem for 20 years, and just their thinking was different, and how they solved the problem was different. So I agree. I think it's a matter of using them as an innovation source, getting behind them, getting funding. Because if the other part of your question was, can we build it all? It's very expensive to build things from scratch, right? There's a whole change in thinking around. Yeah, yeah.
By the way, you are a fintech, just so you know.
I am a fintech. That's right. I'm a QSO and a fintech. It's very expensive to build things from scratch, but because they're hungry and because they're starting out at a smaller level and they don't have the same mental barriers, they are able to move more quickly.
And I'll just add that I talked about speed of execution. There's no possible way that we could build this stuff and get it out to the market. And so if we have to partner with the fintechs in order to have more options, right? Pure and simple. But we want to control the experience.
We actually had this experience at Coastal, so I would really caution you against this, right? So Coastal invented video tellering, and we would have all of these institutions, many of you perhaps, came through our headquarters looking at the PTMs, as we called them, NCR now calls them ITMs. Even sheikhs from Dubai came in to see these things. And they would look at the machine, and they'd be like, okay, I have a strategy, and they'd walk away. That's mimicry. That's not strategy. If I look at Chime and I just try to mimic what I see on the screen, and I don't have the user experiences like checking up what your current mobile phone number is, right? When I'm talking to you, you're not going to deliver the experience, right? So I really caution you about seeing something and just trying to reproduce what you see. There's a lot more behind the scenes that makes that possible, and that's where credit unions can really make a difference.
So let's jump to embedded finance. Does everyone kind of know roughly what embedded finance is when you kind of use that term? I mean, a lot of the embedded finance, it's where the lending occurs at the moment of need, the point of sale. Obviously, that's been sort of a big buzzword in the industry. So I'll ask each of you. So embedded finance, big opportunity for credit unions or the great disintermediator?
Well, that's probably closest to me because that's all we think about is, I really would rephrase it to be, how is the top of the funnel changing? How is the loan application process changing for your members today versus what it was 10 years ago? Now, as you guys know, we do a lot of indirect lending. We've done that for many years, and still probably 80+% of loans are still done at the point of sale, at the dealership, okay? It was probably as high as 90% at one time. But where that's changing now, and for those of you, I see a few people here that have seen my talk on the future of mobility, and basically it's saying that, between electric cars, and autonomous cars, that lending's gonna change in a big way. And I can tell you the OEMs right now are not just building, by the way, 150 new EV cars between now and 2026, 25 to 30 of them coming out this year. But the EV companies that are really just, the Rivians of the world, the Lucids of the world, they're gonna make loans like Tesla does, which is, basically direct. And that is gonna be, I think, change a lot of how we have to again, I said, hunt together. We got to find ways to get into their lending stream. And we are talking to them about that, and we do have some inroads, but they're so small right now. They are just got one bank. I actually just ordered a Rivian, and yesterday they told me it's finally coming in. I ordered it about 700 days ago, by the way. And it's probably going to come in the next month. And one of the things that they said to me is that they have Rivian financing, which I believe is with US Bank or one of the big banks that they partnered with. But you have that phenomenon. And then the other big one, though, is the OEMs are the place where most people look for new cars. And you know, a lot of people are buying cars sight unseen these days. So they are now, OEMs are now going to be putting the financing in at their level. And then it's going to drop into the dealership where they get the loan, where they get the car. So we are also working with OEMs today to try to integrate credit unions into that space. But that is going to be definitely a big disruptor for us. So there's probably many other areas that you guys probably are aware of too, that besides the automotive area where the top of funnel is changing. But I do think the top of funnel is going to change, and it's going to be more online.
Yeah, I call that maybe one of the shock events for the industry in terms of the impact of just sort of how auto loans are purchased and financed. You had talked about fintechs kind of taking over consumer lending. If now auto lending changes dramatically, that's a big shock event to have to adjust to. Jen, any thoughts on what Tony shared or other points of view?
Well, just to add to that, we have Rocket Mortgage, by the way, for mortgage lending that, are conduits. But talking about like somebody like Walmart, Walmart wanted to be a bank, right? We heard that for years. They kept trying to apply for charters. They even at one heard, I don't know if I can't fact check this one, but that they actually tried to want to apply for a credit union charter. And what they did, partner with a fintech because the bank probably couldn't offer it, but they're just using a bank on the back end. So think about what that's going to do to marginalize our operation, right? I mean, we really don't make a lot of money on those accounts anyway, but now you've got a big retail player like that really driving that margin down. That's all Walmart does is grind that down the same way that they've grind down at our interchange. So when you think about that kind of threat, I think it's something to worry about, and we need to find other ways of directing our business so that we can still be here for the going concern.
One of the trends in fintech is that they're looking for somebody who can be the account behind their service, right? We were actually contacted by an institution who asked if we knew a fintech that could help them become a BIN sponsor for fintechs, right? So the idea that there would be an account run by a fintech that's sponsored by the institution underneath the covers, because they said we're not earning money. Right, we really need to. We're trying everything we can do to find new ways to earn money. So even if that means we're just the back office, we're just the cage, like in a casino metaphor, right? We'll take it because that's all we can get right now. I mean, that's really disturbing and disruptive.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, again, the point about Walmart wanting to get into banks and kind of changes in the auto space. I mean, Walmart is rolling out a car buying program. So, they're going to get into that space as well. One of our companies that we've invested in is powering that technology, though. And I think that creates an opportunity for credit unions through that partnership to hopefully get a big chunk of those loans. But how about blockchain? That's always everyone's favorite topic. I'm going to, Chris, go back to you. Believer or all hype?
I am 100% believer. So I know people spent COVID doing lots of cool things like learning how to make soda bread and weave and things like that. I spent 2 years learning everything I could about blockchain and cryptocurrency. And what I learned scared the hell out of me, right? And it's blockchain, decentralized finance. We've had really great speakers like Lamont Black on this who have really shared the vision for this in the future. But it's going to disrupt finance as we know it, which is really hard to say to a group of people who work in finance. But the reality is you need to go learn everything you can and do away with the thinking around, oh, well, there's a crypto winner and yeah, Chris lost this much in his portfolio. Yeah. it's the technology that's important, and that technology is going to change the game. And it is a perfect example of where you see fintechs coming out. And how many of you are going to Money 2020? Ooh, there's a sign. Last year, 50% of the exhibitors in that hall were crypto and blockchain. And I know of probably 5 credit union people who were there out of that 10,000. Doesn't mean I know everybody, but it's pretty close. So I would just tell you that do not blow it off. This is an opportunity. We've got to get things going around it. I know Visions is doing a great job putting together some digital asset user groups on this. We need to learn as much as we can about this. As a reformed developer, it scares me about how powerful it is and what it can do, and that we aren't prepared for it at all.
And I think it's going to happen faster than everyone thinks. I feel like progress over the last 3 years in terms of real tangible use cases, the technology being built out, and this is one where again, things feel like they move slow until they don't, and you wake up some morning and the entire industry is disrupted. Are people familiar with the company Figure? So Mike Cagney, who's the former founder and CEO of SoFi, launched a company called Figure, and it's leveraging blockchain. Kind of the original use case or first test case was to be direct-to-consumer lender in the HELOC space. They're now licensing out the technology. They've created 5 different use cases for blockchain that are in production. So I know Mike's going to he's really interested in working with credit unions. I know we've got an event with maybe a few of you CEOs that we're having next month in Denver. Mike's going to come out there. He's going to sit down and spend, and his top leadership team with credit unions of how they can leverage some of the technology that Figure's using. So I think it's going to sweep over us I think faster than we can imagine. And but Tony and Jen, what are your thoughts?
I would just echo. I agree. I think the technology is, and it's not the blockchain technology that invented Bitcoin. It's all the new flavors of blockchain that are coming along that are going to reinvent contracts effectively. Paper's going to go away. You're going to see, both. Hopefully, you'll see the DMV go away. Wouldn't that be great?
Yes.
But it really will be, I think, a fast changing world as a lot of these fintechs, and we're actually working with Lamont Black on a project to look at how we can use NFTs, non-fungible tokens, the things that are in the metaverse right now that everybody's paying a bunch of money for. We actually think it could be used for real business purposes and could help reinvent kind of like the titling and contracting, and so we're looking at that now too. And I've talked to Figure a half a dozen times, and I'm still trying to figure them out. No, they really are onto something, but they have changed their kind of what they want and where they're going, and it's just like any kind of innovation. Though they're looking at a lot of different things. So but I do think they're something to be to look at too, and it's definitely exciting stuff.
Want to open it up now and see, if you will. Yes, Renee, raise your hand, ask a question.
Need to know. You don't need, I need mic. Need to know. You said 10,000 fintechs. Scared me to death because.
That was
have
yesterday.
to. Okay, 10,000 fintechs. How many are led by people of color and women?
Not enough, to be quite candid. When we look at these venture-backed companies, the statistics are around north of 95% of all venture capital is going to companies founded and led by white men, and that's a huge problem. We actually created the Discovery Fund, so we have a venture fund that we launched in 2021 that only invests in companies that are led by diverse founders. So these are women founders, founders of color, LGBTQ founders. And many of these are also really kind of looking to serve and address the financial challenges of many of those diverse groups that they come from. And we hope to change that. We've already invested, I think, in 16 companies in just over 21, a little less than 21 months. That is unfortunate, but and we're seeing some really great ideas and these companies doing really well. And hopefully, the money will flow when these founders can show that they can build companies just as well as any white man. Elizabeth McCluskey leads the Discovery Fund, and she's joining one of the panels tomorrow. So I'm sure she'll have a lot more to share on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So First Underground, I swore to myself I'd stay quiet and just observe, but this is just too good. So huge red flag for me when the entire audience laughed about a young member reaching out to a contact center. So we've talked a lot about what's happening in the industry. What are credit unions doing, or what do they need to do more of in general to better align themselves, to act more like a fintech? Because in my opinion, Diamond's, he's wrong. Fintechs have already lapped us. They're already doing most things we do much better. We just refuse to acknowledge it and then work toward a solution.
Yeah, how many times have you called Amazon here? Anybody? Anybody talk to anybody at Amazon? Yeah, that's why I think they laughed, right?
Yeah, and thank you for the opportunity to mention this. This is about that mimicry that I was talking about, right? What we see is consumer-facing fintech, and we think that's the priority, right? All of you are experiencing rising expenses in your back offices, right? Fintechs can come in and help you with your back office and help with that experience and really drive, and especially around analytics in some cases, knowledge about your members, knowledge about consumers that are going to help do that. So whether it's applying artificial intelligence in the back office, that's going to have you're going to break some eggs in that case, because maybe in the end you don't need as many people, but we'll find other places where they can contribute. But I would strongly encourage you, don't think of fintech just as member-facing. There is a equally popular, and there's a lot of great fintechs out there that can help your back office as well.
So thank you, guys. You mentioned 10,000 fintechs, and our credit union has partnered with a handful of fintechs. We've had a great relationship with them. They exist today. They're still here today, and they're helping us serve our members. We've also partnered with fintechs that no longer exist, that aren't around. And that's concerning when you have members that you've handed off effectively to them in some way, even though we control the experience. So my question is about sort of the weeding out of fintechs down the road. We've seen an erosion of gross margins in the fintech industry. They're simply not where they need to be to survive. And so you're seeing burn rates. They're running through money very quickly, millions and millions of dollars every month. And so my concern is about partnering with somebody that's not going to exist down the road. So any thoughts on that?
I mean, obviously, I think a couple of excellent points. I mean, selection of your fintech partners is really critical. And I tell credit unions, look at who their investors are. That's not a question that's probably on too many vendor diligence checklists, for that very reason. Ask people like that, have an inside look at their financials. Fintechs guard their financials, furiously. They don't turn them over, because in many cases they are, not yet profitable. I would say sort of the market's pretty volatile right now, and so, it's amazing when I think those fintechs realize sort of that the tap is going to be, shut off or at least turned way down, how suddenly they're becoming much more judicious about how they spend money. And so we're seeing more companies that are getting close to cash flow break even. or EBITDA positive. So hopefully that will change, but unfortunately, I think the alternative is if, hey, I'm just not going to then partner with fintechs because there might be some risk, or there might be a partner that isn't around 5 years from now. I don't know that there's necessarily other options other than just kind of maintaining status quo. And I think that, in my view, is a much bigger risk to the future of credit unions.
I'd like to add that, I'm sitting with an amazing group of people here right now, and I'm partnering with all of you because we can't do it alone. So I really lean on my partners to do the vetting for us and weed out some of that. The other thing I said earlier about controlling the experience, because if you have the opportunity to be able to control the experience, if that fintech is no longer supporting you, you can plug somebody else in. So I think that creating a space that's universal and able to adapt allows us to provide the service to the members, but they don't know who's in the back end. And that, I think, is a really important part. The third thing is I wanted to add is we just had our planning session. I mentioned that earlier. And our board is supportive of allowing us to have a little venture capital money as well. And that is so that we can invest in some of these partners. And they may not flourish, but how do we know until we get in there and start to learn and develop from them? So I think that is a kind of a different mindset, because we're used to making proposals that have a ROI, and we have to prove our due diligence. And now we're going to pivot and say, we like this concept, let's learn from it, maybe mimic a little bit, but be able to reconnect.
So Tony, we've got somebody that wants to ask a question
Okay.
right there.
Okay.
Zach, was there a question? Yep.
Hi, this is Kirsten Trusco. Thank you, Zach, for the first time here. Spent a lot of time working with fintechs and FIs. And I wanted to comment on why there's not that much venture capital money going to underserved populations. Maybe there's a couple of ideas. Money 2020 has had a Rise Up program that helps to bring women and underserved through and to mentor. And I got to be on the founding committee on that and to help with that. And it's been delightful. And then there's also things like Falls FinTech, which is founded by a bank, by a community bank. And they've got a really cool process of bringing fintechs through, and they get to see a whole lot of them and narrow it down, get to serve on that board too. So maybe those are ideas.
Great. Great information. So we've got one last question here, Kevin, and then we'll make closing statements.
Great panel. Building on that concern around fintech's viability, I think we approach this discussion from a very binary perspective, meaning I'm either innovative and I'm going to work with the fintech, or I'm not going to do anything. Could you provide some practical advice to credit unions on the gray area? The process around innovation, the test and learn process, proof of concepts, it's not necessarily all or nothing. And I think credit unions are uncomfortable with making imperfect decisions.
That is 100% true, and that's actually what I was gonna tap into with Todd. There's a mental barrier that many credit union leaders have, and that's I can never take anything away. Okay, yes you can, right? You can absolutely take away things, and you need to take away things. Otherwise, you end up looking like that, Walmart aisle after, Black Friday, and there's stuff all over the place, right? So, you have to be willing to take things away. And the way you do that is through agile development, agile practices with your solutions, right? You take something away, you give something. The next generation expects things to change. They don't expect you to sit with the same application for 5 years. Right? You've got to be showing them that you're thinking about them, that you're doing those innovations. And I would just add that takes time, that takes testing, that takes experience. But if I go in and say, I can never lose anything, it's got to be 100% perfect before I go live, you're not the right person to work with a fintech, frankly. And I would say if you really like somebody and they're struggling financially, buy them.
Okay, so thank you very much. Let's wrap up. Yeah, but we have to keep this moving, okay? So it's got to be a quick question.
Yeah, it's not a question. So basically, in a credit unions jumping from where they are to fintech, right? There is a people tech and a bank tech in between. We don't talk much about. People are busy 24/7 doing their grunt work. We are not releasing them from that. And the second part is our core systems are stuck in legacy. We have not done anything in that. So without that directly jumping to fintech, the problems what the gentleman mentioned, those will happen. That's my thought.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you very much. Any final comments? They're going to all be here, so you can talk to them later. Let's thank them. Thank you. Woo. Whoa, I don't know if that was scary or, gave us an opportunity to really think. So now we're going to move into an area that I'm going to find fascinating from the standpoint of, all right, we've got all this data now. We've got all this information. We're in a position to know more about consumers. And the further we get with knowing about consumers, the more questions are going to be in the future. So we want to talk about a controversial topic: human and digital intersectionality, a moral dilemma, or not. All right? So what I'd like to do is have Mylene come up. She's our moderator for this panel. She's from Collins Community Credit Union. Welcome. Raj, where are you? My partner in crime in putting this together, from Connected Federal Credit Union. Stephen Bohannon, who planted the seed with me on this topic. And Ton Lane, who is from Cal Coast Credit Union, and he's been willing to have a cocktail here and there with me to really go into detail on these subjects. So please welcome them to talk about, and let me just set the stage, to talk about buy now, pay later. All right? Credit unions are focused right now on the concept of member well-being. We want, as Jeff indicated, the whole self. We want to help. And yet, we see transactions, much like we did during the days of elder abuse, when we knew this was leading to a problem. And so, without going on a political journey here, what I want to be able to do is say, what if we know that these transactions are leading to behaviors, whether it's crypto, sports betting? We found out some data here in Las Vegas that the #1 day for sex trafficking was Super Bowl through our data. All right? One of the fastest growing buy now, pay later is actually shoot now, pay later. And it's being generated by fintech. Now, we have income, all right? The question that I want our group to explore is, as a governance, on a governance level, and also for us from a kind of inquiring minds, is how do we start to look at that? Or is it none of our business? I'll leave you to it, Mylene.
So what I'm going to do first is really focus on the mental health piece. And then I'm going to let our panelists really talk about what does that really mean. So mental health, is it mainstream or taboo? It's a little bit of both still. Mainstream as in we're talking about it more readily since COVID. Top executives have come out to say, yes, this is important. We need to think about mental well-being as well. I may have some issues dealing with depression and anxiety. So we've started talking about it. But where the taboo piece is the action. Have we done anything about it? In my recollection, really, not really. So we keep everything at arm's length. We recognize there are issues, so we can talk about it now. But still, there's not enough being done to combat it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the numbers. I'm in marketing, so I like to do fuzzy numbers. So to set the stage, so we have, according to the last census, 330 million Americans. More than half are credit union members. Now let's set that aside. Recent Yale Law study about inclusive digital banking had said over 43 million Americans suffer through a mental issue annually. NIH similarly said that people suffering from depression and anxiety are 3 times as more likely to be in debt. So that equals financial instability. What does that mean for our future as a society? Not looking very bright. Take that into consideration. So let's do the math, the 43 million Americans, let's scale that down to credit unions. Let's say 20 million credit union members suffer a mental health issue annually. That means 1 in 6 credit union members have a mental health issue. That's a lot of people that we're serving that we may not be doing anything for. And if we know information, what is our responsibility to our members? Are we actually people helping people? Are we helping ourselves, trying to be sustainable? So really the question is, take some scenarios before I pass it off. Let's take romance scams out there. We have actually a former board member's wife that is the next door neighbor of my CEO. So she talks to her, trash can talk, I say. They go pick up their trash cans, have a conversation, and she recognized that there may be issues happening. So what did she do? Her position as CEO, well, let me take a look at what she's doing. And she did find some inconsistencies. So what she did was halt them and have a conversation. But still, ultimately, 80% of the time, the member still makes the decision. Let it go. I believe in this. So what do we do as a credit union? Do we take that next step? Do we take it to the authorities? Do we take it to DHS? Now, those things take time and resources that most credit unions don't have today. But can we willingly let this go on? And this could be applied to any scenario, not just romance scams. So I'll pass it off.
Right. Well, that was a plethora of use cases out there, right? So let's try to tackle it, what's in our control versus what's not, right? So as a financial institution, of course, you're dealing with data. I mean, you have data, and the data tells you a story, right? So based on transaction history, you can pretty much, you can nail it to the point where you know exactly what a person is interested in, does in her or his daily lives, all of their hobbies, pretty much all of their actions, behaviors. You can predict pretty much anything and everything, almost everything. But as an institution, you only have a sliver of that information, right? Sometimes the data gets fuzzy because you don't have the full picture, right? You only have a sliver of that information. So what that means is, however, as a consumer, you are transacting across multiple financial institutions or multiple retail institutions. So you need that broader aspect of all of the transactions put together to paint a picture, right? So to your point, I might have some data that says he or she is suffering from mental health issues or financial distress, or maybe a romance scam, maybe maybe a sex trafficking, getting sex trafficked. But that's just a sliver of information. So how do you piece all of that information together to paint the picture, right? So that's where you need more of a governing body or a governing entity that has access to information from all of the different sources, and they're able to correlate all of that information, hopefully in real time, and make an actionable decision, or make it actionable with law enforcement or whichever governing body or whoever, right? The danger is making
a decision based on that sliver of information that we as an institution have. Sometimes you might be right, but sometimes you might be wrong, right? So that's where you need to have data from all of the multiple sources to make that decision.
Yes, I agree. In fact, because that data is there. In fact, Raj, I brought yours. And I thought we would, just so everyone knows what you're into. Just kidding. No, you're exactly right. In fact, you may know Alchemy just bought a company called Segment a few months ago, and it is spooky what you're able to derive about someone based upon all their financial account information. We can tell whether or not you like to vacation, whether or not when you vacation you're a timeshare owner, or whether or not you like to go and stay in hotels. We can tell if you're a golfer. We can tell if you're a parent or a grandparent or getting ready to be one of those things. And we use it for marketing really well, right? But that same information can be used to be early warning signs of this. But I think what you're bringing up, you're bringing out the inherent problem that can exist with maybe not having a complete picture of it. But let's just assume for the sake of the argument that we did have a complete picture of it, that we knew this was the primary transacting account. And so we said, you can assume you've got 100% of the information. Then the question is, do you do anything? Do you have a responsibility to do anything? We are in Sin City, of course. I know sorry for the people that live here, to call it that, but we're in Vegas. Lots of vices available here. I think, if you, correct me if I'm wrong, of course, this is everywhere in the country. You drink too much, the bartender has a responsibility to pull back the drink, right? Not serve you anymore. Here in Vegas, if they feel as though you are gambling more than you can lose, they'll literally stop you, come back, talk to you. You sure you can afford this? So, because they ultimately don't want you to run your life, right? They want you to keep coming back, and they want this to be a lifetime thing, not something that makes you. There's a reason why for many, many years none of these hotels had balconies on them, right? There is. There is absolute reason behind that. So we see even in this industry where they feel like in the vice industry, there's a certain responsibility to when I notice things that could be destructive to people's personal lives, I'm going to step in, or at least I'm going to be able to hit the pause button for a little bit. So then we kind of bring that over to us, who actually has a lot more data than what the bartender would have or what the pit boss would have. And we'd say, what responsibility do we have to look at this? All of a sudden, I can see a person's, for instance, one of the things we can do is we can absolutely look and see what your income is, and then I can tell you what percentage of your income you're spending on sports betting, what percentage of your income you're spending on other, whether it be gambling, pornography, any other sort of kind of vice, and I can say, whoa, like this person, and this person's bouncing checks for their mortgage or their rent or whatever. Like, that's a problem, right? So I think that first, I definitely want to get into like how you would actually do it, the governance around it and all that. But I think the first question we should ask is, should we even? Or is it really kind of see no evil, hear no evil, and just kind of go about our daily business? And our job is to facilitate and to assume that we don't know the whole story. Therefore, it absolves us of responsibility.
So before I get to talking about this topic, I have to address Sue's comment in introduction about sharing cocktails. Oftentimes here in Vegas, they never, pulled back. The bartenders continue to serve. So we never got to that point. But when I got the email, like many of you, to speak at this session, I was looking at the topics and I'm like, what? I didn't understand that. The human and digital intersectionality. I had to look up the word intersectionality, and then I called Sue and Zach and said, what are we talking about here? And I think we were on the phone for an hour and a half, and I will tell you, being on the phone with Sue is like therapy for me. So thank you for that, Sue. So I'm going to take a little bit of a different twist on this, and because I do think we have a responsibility. That's my bottom line. I'm not going to talk about mental health. I'm going to talk about economic abuse and financial coercion related to something that's very close to me, and I'll explain why that's the case. But economic abuse and financial coercion related to those victims of domestic violence, human trafficking, and those that grow up in the foster care system. And I think we all can learn something about that today. I continue to learn about the foster care system, and I'll share a story with you about that and the financial coercion that takes place there. You wouldn't think it would, but It does. So I'm not an expert in this. I will admit that. I happen to be married to a wonderful lady who works in this space, though. She's a politician, but she also runs a foundation that assists primarily women and children that are fleeing domestic violence. And never thought there was a financial component to it, a financial coercion component to it, but there is. And it often ends up turning into homelessness. She's gotten involved with human trafficking. The stories are just tragic that I get to hear on a nightly basis, and foster care as well. So for me, and I think the title says a moral dilemma, there's not a question mark there. It's not a moral dilemma. It's a moral imperative. It's a moral imperative that we get involved. Now, economic abuse in domestic violence, human trafficking, and foster care leads to many things. I think we know what they are. A poor credit history, financial instability, leaves them vulnerable to collectors and collection agencies. It oftentimes forces them into bankruptcy. And the long-term consequences are huge in terms of their ability to get education, housing, and employment. So again, the long-term effects are significant. So I believe that credit unions should play a role in the identification, now whether it's through data or what we do today in our branches and call center, but we do have a role in the identification, prevention, and recovery of victims of human trafficking, domestic violence, and those that grow up in the foster care system. And I find it quite ironic that we are required, you all are required to do elder abuse training on an annual basis, but you are not required to do any training on domestic violence, identifying those that are domestic violence, financial coercion. It seems ironic to me that we're not. And I think it's wrong. Now, there has been legislation proposed. Our credit unions in the state of California or in San Diego, there has been numerous bill after bill after bill in our state legislature that has tried to take various runs at it, and there's been some success, and it's very recent. I'll share a little bit about that, but it's mostly failed. And it's mostly failed because guess who opposes it? We do. Credit unions do. Banks do. We don't want to have to deal with it. We don't want the obligation in that space. And in my opinion, we ought to be working with our legislatures to find some common ground here, to figure out what our role is, again, in identifying, preventing, and repairing. There was a bill recently that was proposed in the state of California to simply provide voluntary training to financial institutions on how to identify victims of domestic violence as it relates to financial coercion. We're not fixing the world, we're dealing with one section of it. It was voluntary training, voluntary, it wasn't required. And our concern as an industry, and I understand the arguments on both sides of the issue, but our concern was if it's voluntary today, it's going to be mandated tomorrow. Therefore, we oppose. I'm not sure that's the right approach. Now, there has been some success, especially in the state of California. There was a Senate Bill 975. You could look it up. I'm hopeful that it will carry forward into other states, that other states will look at it and perhaps adopt something similar. And Senate Bill 975, which passed the state legislature and was signed by the governor of California, begins early in 2023, provides for the recovery from some victims of financial coercion. And when I say recovery, it's financial recovery. They're not getting money back, but they're left out of the collection efforts if they can prove in a non-judicial manner, so it's not, the courts are not involved, but if they can prove that they were coerced into that debt, then they they can't be collected upon, it won't show up on their credit report, and I think that's a great thing. But guess what? We as an industry work to narrow that, and it only includes unsecured debt. Secured debt was left out. So we can continue as credit unions to collect upon and cause those long-term damages that I talked about in terms of education and housing and their credit score, but we can collect on any secured debt from a victim of financial coercion. So this is something that concerns me. I think we need to work on that. So a little bit about what CalCoast has done. Our credit union, as I mentioned, is based in San Diego. We see these issues, San Diego's a border community, border town. We also serve Riverside County, so we see a lot of human trafficking. Domestic violence is out there. It picked up during the pandemic. It was behind walls quite often. But again, through my spouse and her work in that space, it is growing. Domestic violence is growing, and the financial coercion that's going along with it. So absent education, absent the sort of legislation behind an effort to help this, we have decided to get involved, and our role has been, we've had a couple of different sort of attempts, not attempts, we're actually doing it. We are doing financial education for those that have fled domestic violence, those that were somehow escaped human trafficking. It's not just sex trafficking, it's also a modern day form of slavery, quite honestly. And foster youth that have been damaged. So we are doing financial education for all three of those groups, and we've partnered with not-for-profits in the San Diego region that serve those individuals. And we also did something I think that was very beneficial and unique, and it's specific to those victims, again, of any of those three categories. They need transportation. Oftentimes, like domestic violence, they're fleeing in the middle of the night. The person who's perpetrating the domestic violence is not going to let them take the automobile. They're literally on the streets. And we are working with our third-party auto buying service to get them transportation, reasonable transportation at cost. No margins for the car buying service. It's New Cars Inc. It's based in San Diego. So those are some of the things that we are doing, but we are, again, very much interested in collectively advocating for them and for helping them get back on their feet.
Thanks, Todd. So you talk about that it's imperative to do something. And all of us talked about the data that is available. Now, side story, for those that don't know, I lived part of the year in Singapore. And why this really resonates is because when we talk about data, everybody talks about privacy. I want the right to my privacy. But as marketers, we love the data because we need to be targeted so we don't waste all of our money. So just taking a look at, when I say we, I mean Americans, they are very guarded with their privacy. I mean, when we have vaccine and immunization records, to create a national registry here was impossible because people wanted their right to privacy there. But in Singapore, pretty much you give up your right to privacy. And it's because they live a very different life over there. It's very safe. My 10-year-old walks 15, 20 minutes by herself downtown. You see hordes of 8 to 12-year-olds out and about in the mall. Here, I would never allow that to happen because of trafficking situations and things like that. So at what point, how far can we take this thing when we talk about privacy?
I'll take a stab at it, right? So I totally agree with what Steve and Todd were talking about, right? It's a moral imperative. If you know the data, if you understand what's going on, we need to say something about it, talk about it, or report it. But that reporting aspect needs to be you have to tackle the privacy aspect, right? So just like we take freedoms for granted, we also take privacy pretty serious, right? So data privacy is critical. To me, it is important. Maybe my daughter, not as much. She doesn't care what she puts up on social media. But hey, there's a generation, there are several generations that we do care about data privacy. Having said that, so now it's a three-legged stool, right? So how do you take the data that you have, the intelligence that you glean out of that data, you're identifying distress, you're identifying unusual activity, or whatever the case might be. Now, how do you take that data, maintain data privacy, maintain the separation so that you're not making a bad decision, right? You create that separation and you report up that data to some authority, whatever that governing body is or regulatory agency is, and then you do your part from a reporting standpoint, and then you expect that governing body to act on it, right? So in that sense, hey, as a credit union, I'm at least doing my part by reporting the issue. Hey, I'm providing you all of the information, I'm giving all the data to the agency, and now the agency should have responsibility of saying, okay, Connecta provided this data about this member. Let them validate it. Let them ascertain that whatever I provided to them is actually accurate. Let them bounce it against other databases, other sources of data, and complete the investigation and act on it, right? So they'll know who they need to report to or how the law enforcement gets engaged and act on it. So that way, we are doing our part from a social consciousness standpoint, from a moral obligation standpoint. We are giving them all the data we need. Hopefully, we can get better over time by providing that data in real time, right? So our systems are not such that, today we provide data that's, maybe a day or two old, right? So sometimes the perpetrators have already committed the crime and gone, right? So we need to get to the point where the regulatory agencies that are creating that separation between the financial institutions then get that data in real time, act on it in real time, and stop crime in real time, right? So hopefully we get to that. But this way, I think we do our part. The regulatory agencies, that structure is already in place through USA Patriot Act. It's already there. We already provide them data. It may not be great today, but it needs to get better with time. And more use cases need to be identified in real time. That's where the fintechs come in, right? So we use fintechs to provide this data to FinCEN, let's say, right? We provide data to FinCEN pretty much every day. But the use cases are the same old, right? Hey, fraud, loan fraud, or this fraud, or structuring, or money laundering, or these are all traditional use cases. But the problems we're talking about with human trafficking, or elder abuse, or romance scams, these are all new age things, or mental health, or gun violence. These are the gray area type issues, right? So, but there are data elements that you can provide that can predict some of these use cases. How do you provide this data, right, in a responsible manner while maintaining data privacy? And from a credit union standpoint, we've still done our job, right? And that's the challenge.
Just for the record, I didn't go on record saying that I was for this specifically. I just brought it up as a topic. I think it's very clear, obviously, if it's something that has to do with legality, that's clear cut. We're talking about, as you said, a grayer area, which is more, it's like the same responsibility. I remember, this is like when I was like a teenager, I remember bouncing my first check at Tinker Federal Credit Union. And I think back at the time it was $15, $18. It was a lot of money to have that kind of a fee. And I remember calling them and begging for forgiveness. And they're like, we can't forgive you, but we can reverse that if you come in and we actually take you through how to balance your checkbook course. And if you demonstrate and you kind of go through and take the test or whatever, then at that point we'll credit it back. So I was like, okay, so you'll teach me how to not do this in the future, and in exchange, to me that was my earliest memory of what made a credit union different than a bank. was that they were there to actually help me, and if I wanted to help myself. So it's that same spirit that kind of comes into this thing, right? It's not a legal question. It kind of gets into the moral side of things, but you're exactly right where then you get into the privacy side, right? Because in order for you to be able to help me, you have to kind of invade my privacy a little bit, right? You have to kind of look into a few things that maybe you have no business connecting those dots. And so how dare you connect those dots on me, right? So you have to be willing to be kind of bold in that area in order to actually make that happen. So like one thing I was just thinking about as you were speaking was, what if there was something that was it was kind of sly? Like, okay, I've identified through these algorithms and stuff, this person's got a big gambling problem. I can tell it because I can tell how much money's coming in their account, how much is going out, they keep chasing. Maybe I don't call them and say, by the way, you've tripped our Gamblers Anonymous, but maybe all of a sudden there's a piece of content that shows up and saying, hey, did you know that we sponsor with whatever? And it's just in a rolling reel that they don't know that they're a select few group of people that are getting that particular ad. Just same thing we do with other kind of marketing, right? So there are some ways you could be kind of sly where you're like, and you're talking about the domestic support or domestic violence things and things like that. There could be ways that you bring awareness to a certain select group of members without it, like the jig is up, like we've been looking at your data and we've identified that you're having a problem. So there could be some ways you could do it that way, but I'm not settled on this topic. I think privacy is really, really important, and it's really difficult to help someone without invading their privacy a bit. So
Totally agree, but again, when it comes to elder abuse and elder dependent care abuse, we are mandated to report that. And we report it to, I think it's FinCEN, and they take it from there. They do the investigation using other data sources. So I believe they ought to expand the list from just elder financial abuse. And there are other ways I think, to tackle this. And as I was hearing these comments, I was thinking back to the Great Recession, and a lot of us had, not a lot of us, every credit union in the room had members that had a lot of financial stress during the Great Recession. And I remember I started at CalCoast in 2009. The very first meeting I was in, we were sitting down going through members that had requested loan modifications. We were going through their checking account. Not with them present, but we profess to be all about financial wellness. This is a part of financial wellness. We can't extract this part of it. But we were sitting down looking through their checking account to figure out how to do a loan modification that was appropriate for that member. We didn't invite them into the discussion until later on, until we thought we had a solution that they could live with and that we could live with. I just don't see a difference here.
Here's the difference there, right? Is that they were requesting the loan modification. They invited you. This is a little different because you're talking about proactively or even just from algorithmically monitoring things. So I think that is, I totally agree with you. If someone asks you to change the loan, okay, we need to go see your spending patterns. We need to see if you're being responsible. But if they don't ask you for anything and you're kind of, quote, sticking your nose in their business in a sense, and by the way, I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying, but I am playing the devil's advocate here. It's a tough one. It's really a tough one because ultimately your job is to help them. And it's almost like if I can see it and I know you have a problem, am I, in essence, facilitating that, or am I ultimately being callous by not offering help proactively? It feels weird, right? It feels weird to not help whenever you know you can.
Absolutely. I believe we ought to help proactively. But the alternative to that scenario I was saying is we simply lob it over to collections. And good things happen in collections. But for many people... Hopefully I didn't offend anybody.
It sounds like a poster on his wall. Is it good things happen in collections?
Nothing good for the member happens in collection. Now, we help our members, certainly, but again, I don't know exactly what the solution is, certainly relating to the privacy issue, but I think it's a moral imperative. So.
For me, right, so I live in Las Vegas, and like Sue, if you look at my transactions, it's probably all around these casinos and yeah, right. So everywhere, right? So if you
blackjack, really,
yeah, exactly. So if you really start profiling me, I'll probably show up in Steve's Gamblers Anonymous list, right? But that's so far from the truth. So there lies the, the danger of misinterpreting the data, right? So you need to paint the full picture.
Here's the other slippery slope, to give you all, whenever Roe v. Wade was overturned, we had to get together. We were basically pre-prepping for potential press reaching out because we do have a lot of data and transaction data, because there was some talk around leveraging transaction and spending patterns to find people who were now, quote, breaking the law by seeking out, basically female healthcare services. And it's like, could they subpoena us for that information? Like, because we cleanse these transactions. We know what they're being used for, even regardless of what the verbose debit string says. We know that was for this kind of clinic or this type of medicine or whatever, right? So there's a slippery slope that it gets into then as well, once you kind of start monitoring to seeing what's going on with the intention of helping. But then all of a sudden now you have access to that data, and now it's no different. I mean, look at the cell phone companies. Look at. Do you remember the whole big blow up with Apple years ago, where the feds wanted them to help them crack into phones, right? Because I know the data is there, and you need to help me as a technology company get to that data. So the slippery slope is when you start doing it for the purposes, albeit good things, and someone says, "Oh, you have access to that? You have that kind of insight?" The government comes along and says, "I'd like you to help me gain a little more insight, actually." So it's scary.
So I'm gonna grab it for a second, because I know we have a question from Ed here, but I also want to do this. All right, I want us to talk about this one. All right, I want you to turn around to your colleagues. And so I know there's a few of you that raised your hands. We'll come back to that in a second. But I'd like you to turn to your colleagues that are sitting around you, and they've just presented kind of the range here. So we had a little bit of a debate. We had a little difference of opinions. So turn around, talk to your colleagues, and let's just, I want to get a read for the energy in the room on this topic. So take about 5 minutes, if you will. Yeah, I'm watching it. Okay. Okay, this is a very underground topic, all right? There's not a yes or no, a right or wrong discussion, or necessarily a point. What we're doing here is challenging all of us to look at our duty of care. And it's just from my perspective, it's very similar to, hey, we give great service, but then we never check our service levels, right? Hey, we're going to do member well-being, but we don't necessarily dig in. So that's what we want, is future conversations about it. I'm going to allow, like, if you will, not allow, if I'm going to ask, I know that we have one question right here, and then we'll go to Brett, I'll come back to you, and then we're going to keep the pace moving.
Hi, my name's Megan. I'm from Westar Credit Union here in Las Vegas. Actually, all of our membership base are casino employees. So I feel what you're saying when all of our transactions, we can't assume things. My question is, I actually used to work for CUSO, and so I worked with a lot of credit unions of various sizes across the country. And one of the credit unions in Michigan, I won't mention names, but they decided that they were going to kind of get ahead of some of this stuff, and they made a blanket statement for their entire membership where they would not allow any of their cards to allow online gambling transactions at all. So anytime you try to use that credit union's debit card or credit card, it would deny the transaction. What are your opinions on, making that blanket statement and trying to control your members, what they get
You're going to talk
do?
about this tomorrow, actually. I think it's on the topic, which is, yeah.
They are like 500 million.
And we tomorrow. So can we wait for that answer?
Not
'Cause I
just
think-
that, but like, what about all kinds of other things that we deem not to be in our moral wheelhouse that we decide we're going to keep our cards from being used because we're not going to facilitate that behavior, right? That's not illegal.
The general issue is what I was just talking to Raj about, was that who do we want to be as a society, as an American society? That's what it ends up being, without talking too much about the topic. Because if we're looking for certain securities or safeties, that absolutely makes sense. But that's not what our society is.
Yeah, so if you're, we are a free society, right? Hey, I need to be able to do sports betting. Why would you want to stop me from doing that? I consider myself a responsible gambler, right? So if I was a member, you would have lost me. If you would have stopped me from doing that, you would have lost me. As simple as that, right? So again, data analytics, data science, predictive analytics, it's all about identifying risky behavior, right?
It goes beyond it, though, right? Because I know we're just previewing into this. Like, we have a customer of ours, a credit union, who is a software customer of ours, where we help them. I won't say the name of it, but they're nationwide. An Alabama credit union is the back end for financing firearm sales, right? Huge, hunting and sporting kind of community all across the country, right? Well, there's people that obviously politically have a real problem with that, think that we should have gun control. Well, we could go take a stance and say, even though it's not illegal, we're not going to allow shopping at firearms dealers with our cards, right? We could take a stand on that. So I think that's the question you get into, is legality versus morality. Is everything that is immoral, should it be illegal? And that's a whole other question in and of itself. But then the question is, what is our job whenever we determine that? Now, you could say, look, we looked at the numbers, like in your particular use case, we looked at the numbers and, oh my gosh, the amount of chargebacks we get because of sports gambling, we're just taking huge losses off of it. So we just cannot continue to support it, or without certain limits or something. That's a little different thing. But I've heard conversations of credit union executives and boards and things, especially when it came around crypto, saying, well, we think that's just really speculative and that's really risky, and so we're not going to be in the business of facilitating that. And I'm like, okay, but they can go down and they swipe their card down here. I'm like, you understand the stock market, every tech stock's like 75% down in the last, but they were complaining that crypto was down 50. But the point is, that's when they start kind of being a bit of a nanny state in terms of, well, we get to decide what's best for you, right? That's a really, really slippery slope.
Hi, I really appreciate this discussion taking place within the credit union space, because the first time I heard of credit unions tackling domestic violence was in the legal space. I'm an attorney by trade, and in 2020, the American Bar Association had a seminar, a Zoom, if you will, talking about how credit unions are tackling domestic violence. And my eyes were like, what are you talking about? Like, I didn't know we were tackling domestic violence, and so I tuned in. And to my surprise, I learned that there are credit unions in New Mexico that started a QSO. And that QSO partners with a domestic violence community partner where they help women, predominantly, mothers, and they have children, and they help them to get on their feet, going through domestic violence situations. And I thought that's such a creative way, to help domestic violence victims, and also a way that we can easily engage, because we know about QSOs, and we start QSOs, we have QSOs, we work with QSOs, so why not? So it doesn't have to be a very high-level approach. We don't have to be lobbying, and it certainly is great to do all those things, but you don't have to feel like, if I'm not doing that, then I can't do something else. And so I encourage you to, I think one of the credit was US Eagle. Yeah, so, people know about it. So definitely, if you want to get involved in that level, and I thought, why not? We could do that perhaps in every state, at least, have at least one QSO trying to help tackle domestic violence, but certainly working with our community partners.
That's excellent. So it's called Sea of Soul, Marcia Majors in New Mexico. Great place. So let's see. Here we go, Brett.
So Brett Martinez, Redwood Credit Union. First of all, I think there is a fine line here somewhere. We'd spend 2 days trying to figure out where that fine line is. What Todd said about legislation got me thinking. So CRA, we don't have CRA, but I'm pretty sure everybody in the room is doing things in their community, and there's a reason we don't have CRA laws, is because that's what we do as credit unions. And I think that this is what we should, it's more of a plea to our industry. We're not using data to go out and identify people, but those people are in our face every single day. And this area in our credit union is centralized in our fraud. It's not all fraud, but these people are ex-law enforcement. They think like this. They know the trends that are going on. They're educating the rest of the staff. To be honest with you, the one that we have some of the biggest issues with is the one that is legislated, which is elder abuse. You get that. You have to check this box, this box, this box. You have to get some third party involved. You mess that up, you got some people that are pretty pissed off at you at the end of the day. So I just encourage us to, maybe there will be legislation, but we don't need legislation. Find a place in your organization where they're responsible, they're watching the trends, law enforcement people, this is the way they think, and I think that's one of the reasons we're strong. This last conversation about deciding what's good for people, I think the only thing, it got me thinking, the one thing that we don't do is, you get free ATMs with us, we'll reimburse you, except for in casinos and strip clubs, so I guess we are deciding what's good for people.
Okay, one more, and then we're going to wrap.
I like what Stacy was saying, and sorry, Damiana Alarcón from Travis Credit Union. But for us to think outside the box with data and the intersectionality with what we do with it, you could just create a double blind, make sure that it seems like if we have the data and we know the issues, but we don't actually know the specified member, if we have a team just say, hey, these are the top 10 issues that might be happening with financial insecurity for the credit union, and then build an opt-in program. Build something that says, hey, help us fight financial insecurity. Would you like to opt into this kind of education? And obviously target adults, not the youth and the minors, but on and on. Use the data. Don't make it specified. Don't reach out to targeted members. Don't try to involve the nanny state and the FBI and go that far, because it's not good for our reputation. It's not good for our business, and we'll be out of the credit industry really quick. But on the other side, we do know it is happening, and to ask ourselves to think outside the box with what we can do, and then ask people to opt into it when we do create that program. I think that's a possibility.
You started something like that,
Yeah.
and then I love that idea. and you had it just kind of automated, just like a lot of the content stuff that's there, right? It's just looking at the data and it's just serving that up when it sees particular patterns. And then you can just kind of watch it and see, do you have people proactively reach out and say, hey, I happen to see this and I really am interested. Then you'd probably learn a bit more about that and even be able to talk to those people and find out, like, should we have reached out more proactively or whatever? So I just think it's one thing where you don't have to decide. It's not like this binary thing, either we're going to care or we're not going to care. I think it's more of like, well, let's see if there's some unintrusive ways where we don't cross these certain lines to get a little more involved. Then let's play it by ear from there and see where it goes.
That's basically what we use Segment for, actually, because it's aggregate data first. You take a look at behaviors, then you start digging down into it. So keeping track of it, that's a good way to keep track, just to say, okay, on a monthly basis, let's look at this segment that we carved out from Segment, literally, and see if behaviors have shifted.
Okay, so we're going to wrap this topic, but you're going to all stick around, right? And be available to people to talk more about it? Okay, tell them thank you, all right? Okay, a couple points that I wanted to make to everybody. Tomorrow, the underground, if you will go to a little bit of the pace. We're spending more time today on a few of these topics because we really do want these conversations, all right? So from that standpoint, we're right on schedule, and I'm very excited to have our CU Rise Up Next Generation Board come up. The industry is going through leadership transitions, and I want to think about it from the standpoint of what does that look like going forward. We know that recently we've had a ruling and discussion or, certainly pushback on the CDFI designation and forcing some cure status on applications based upon our democratic control and our field of membership. And so what we want to do is talk about what it's going to take to bring new board members into this industry. So let me invite up Stacy Walker. She just spoke to us here, and she is a board member with Excel Credit Union. Roxy Ostrom, who's a board member from Ventura County Credit Union. Michael Maxwell, a board member and board chair of SCE Credit Union, and our very own Sarah Bang, who now represents us as an advisor to NCUA. So thank you, everybody, and I'll turn it over to you, Stacey.
Thank you. It's an honor and pleasure to be here. It's an honor and pleasure to be here. As Sue said, I'm Stacy Walker. I'm with Excel Federal Credit Union, and we have with us 3 panelists today who will talk to us about next generation leadership, which is can be shortened to next gen, as people like to say. So when I think of next gen leadership, 3 words came to my mind: inward, outward, and forward. Inward speaks to who we are as members first, and then who we are as volunteers or employees in the industry. So inward will have us take a self-assessment as to what we're doing, what values we hold, what we care about, and how are we acting upon that individually. Outward speaks to what's happening in our industry, what is happening at our credit unions, what's happening with our trade associations, with our industry partners, and what's happening in the political sphere as well. And we will also want to talk about how we're collectively advancing credit unions and setting the stage for the future generations. So in that aspect, we like to do a peer assessment. It's always good to have that, as we heard earlier, people talking about, are we hunting together? Forward sums up the direction in which we want to go. And it begs the question, what do we want our credit unions to look like in a future place and time? What solutions will we create today for our future leaders? As a former earlier panelist mentioned, it's about forward thinking and removing barriers, mental barriers, if you will. So starting with looking inward, I would like the panelists to each share why they do what they do. because our history and our experience shapes our perspective on the topic of next-gen leadership. So Roxy, I'll start with you.
Thank you. For me, it started 50 years ago when my mom was on the board, and the credit union was the only institution that would lend her money as a single mom. So I watched this throughout my whole life, how they helped her, how she got on the board, and she helped people through the policies and whatnot that they made. I got on the supervisory committee in 1998, and so I'm on the downhill side of things as far as the board is concerned. And I'm happy to say that, because so often we have board members that this becomes their social club, their get-together once a month with their friends that they've been on the board forever with. And so somebody has to have that hard conversation with them and say, hey, listen, you know, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time we need to make way for the new upcoming generation. We'll have board members that, I don't want an iPad, I don't want to work on an iPad, mail me that packet that's 300 pages long. I'll be just fine. Well, you know, those days don't exist anymore. You need to stay up to date with the technology that's going on. So we started our modernization at VCCU in 2018. And we're still working on it today. It's ever changing, it's ever evolving. And you need to be sure that as individuals, that you're still willing to be always evolving. So I wanted to say we have 2 strategic plannings a year. The first one in the spring is primarily for the board education and governance. Last, February in DC, we had some great speakers at Underground, just really awesome speakers. I'm sitting there going, the whole board should be here. They would really benefit from this. I really think we need this whole board here. So I got with Sue and said, hey, these are the folks that we would like to talk to us, to educate us, to give us different perspectives from a board point of view. Can you put this together for strategic planning? And sure enough, she zoomed in all these people that I had the opportunity to hear at Underground in DC, and it was fabulous. It's not always having to have a high top guest speaker. This room is full of people that can give great advice, has great knowledge. We need to continue to use what we have in this room and go forward with this stuff. You have to stay relevant. You have to continue to put the member first and stay with that all the way through. And when you're done, say thank you and move on to the next generation.
Thanks for that segue. So I mean, to start, like, the reason why I serve is because I get out of this as much as I put in, right? You know, I get to learn so much every single day. You know, I started back on the supervisory committee in my credit union in 2014. I took over as the chair in 2015. The NCUA come in and asked me how old I was in 2015. I was like 27. I'm like, why does that matter? And they're like, do you know what you do? And I'm like, yep, I do. I do audits. But I mean, the bottom line is, like, the average board member is 70 years old in our industry, right? They know what it was 30 years ago to bank, right? We just had a great conversation about fintechs. Do you think that they know what fintechs are? You think what they know as far as those technology leaders are going to be doing? They don't. Like, so how can you expect your credit union to move forward when your leadership and the voices on the board do not understand what's going on, right? And so the other thing is, like, what we're starting to do, you know, at my credit union is we're starting to do a self-assessment, right? Internally saying, okay, where are our strengths, where are our weaknesses on the board, right? And then once we complete that, then we're gonna target, hey, I need a marketer
I need an IT person, right? I need something in this space to actually make it work and make a difference, right? And maybe you don't have space on the board because you have long-term board members. That's fine. We're creating a board advisory role, right? That they can actually come in and listen and add their voice. They don't get a vote, but they get to come in, experience the credit union, and it also acts as a natural feeder to say, hey, when someone rolls off, hey, you already understand, you have a great voice, you understand us. Like, how can I get you back there first? So I think we really need to understand when we talk about the next generation, it's not just because I'm young, right? It's because I bring a different perspective. I'm an entrepreneur, I have tech backgrounds, I have operations experience, but like we just heard, car loans are going away. So why do I need a board member who's the expert on car loans, right? I need a board member who's gonna be an expert marketer or an expert in fintech to actually really drive the credit union forward. And that's what I think we're missing with boards, and we just need to go next time.
That's very good. I think that's really great. Well, you asked why I do this. Sometimes I don't know, Sue. Some of you know I retired, how many years ago? 5 years ago. And lucky me, my former board chair from FSCC is in my hometown of Portland, or was in, came up, and he's now CEO of Unitas. And he says, okay, payback time. He says, would you like to, see if you could serve on the board of Unitas Credit Union? And I didn't make it to the board, by the way. I only made it to the audit committee, which meant that I could go to all the board meetings plus 4 of the audit committee meetings a year. It was awesome. I would not have this job today if I hadn't done that. And so I owe you not much. So let me just preface this. This is Sarah Bang, 40 years in the credit union movement. I know. Somebody back there earlier said, you've done a lot. And I'm like, yeah, and it was kind of like, you're so old. And in fact, I want you to know, I am the oldest person at NCUA. There's like 5 people that are older than I am, but really, I'm the oldest person there. So I try not to dress like that. But I have learned a lot being there, and I was really, it was such a blessing to be able to serve on the audit committee for this credit union. Because all these years being in trade associations and CUSOs, of course, I had all the answers, right? And what I got was a wonderful lesson in that I didn't have all the answers. And that when this stuff hits a credit union board, there's a lot of treading water, there's a lot of scrambling, there's a lot of fire drills, because if you've got a board that's even half aware, they are worried about, technology and things like that. So, but one thing I've seen, and this is just some potential advice, and this is to all of our credit union boards out there and CEOs, and that is making sure that your board understands the difference between a credit union and a bank. Does that, I never thought I'd have to say that. And Natalie, who's with us today, Natalie Wave, yes, see, we've got 2 regulators with you today. But Natalie has heard me say to people at NCUA, give me 5 ways that credit unions are different than banks. Oh, and by the way, if you say credit unions are nicer, you're fired. Because that is not, and I can't fire them, by the way. But knowing what a credit union is, and from the standpoint, we kind of danced around it when we were talking about collectively advocating, and I think it was Chris Kovacs who talked about it's all about convenience. Convenience, and I don't disagree with you, Chris, but convenience is in the eye of the beholder, and the beholder is the member, and your field of membership is your community. And so understanding, so I think we're dancing around this business about diversity on boards, right? What is your field of membership and what's your community? And so one of the problems I know some credit unions have in terms of getting diversity on their board is that some people can't afford to take time off during the day to come to a board meeting or to read 300 pages of a board packet, Steve. No, I get Although I have to say Payback was really great because I used to send him 300-page board packets, and then I started getting these 200-page board packets, and I called him up and I said, "You're doing this on purpose, aren't you?" Anyway, but not everybody can do that, and so the question is, can we pay these people? You know, and I know that that's not always, you know, something, and I can't comment on it other than it's, you know, there's got to be something in this for these folks if you want diversity. But knowing what a credit union is and knowing. And I appreciate the training that there's out there. CUNA, NAFCU, all of these folks have wonderful training cues on what a credit union is. What would really help, and I see this at NCUA with board members, and what would really help is if it's described in real language, real, understandable. The people who, having the folks that are sitting across the table from the single mom, who you can see the tears, you know, they have to make a choice on whether they get their kids, you know, medicine or gas, right? And right now it's pretty bad. But the people who actually see that and can communicate that emotion and what that means, that's telling the credit, I think it's telling the credit union story. Being able to say, this is, these are our owners. You know, these are our owners, and we have an obligation to take care of them. And I know that there's, you know, there's a proposed rule out there about member expulsion. I'm not going to say other than, you know, expelling a customer, you know, kicking them out of your lobby is a whole lot different than expelling an owner. And so, you know, treating people like their owners. And if they don't know their owners, that's not on them. That's on us. Do they realize? And and I've had this conversation with folks at NCUA. Do you know why credit unions, you know, take longer to, you know, to work out a loan or really, you know, work on those things? Part of it used to be in accounting. Remember, some of you are old enough to remember when we had cooperative accounting in credit unions. Now we've got GAAP, which means you have to get rid of bad loans right away, right? But credit unions fight that. You know, we're trying to help these folks and you know, sending, you know, getting rid of those loans without helping this member work that out is not the credit union way, you know, and I'm not preaching. These are our members, and if they need our help that way, we need to give it to them that way. Then the other thing I just want to, these poor guys were like, oh God, is she ever gonna shut up? You know,
She said she had nothing to talk about. She was
like, I'm not gonna
nervous.
say. That's right. Yeah, but the other issue, and Sue and I kind of go at this, there's a couple of us who go at this. Why aren't there more women CEOs at the top levels of credit unions? And I think it goes back to not all of us know what a credit union is. You know, if you look at the lower asset ranges of credit unions, it's like 53% are run by women, right? But when you start getting up, well, who's hiring those people at the larger credit unions? It's not the other women in the C-suite, it's the board, right? And now, so take my comments earlier, and that is knowing what a credit union is all about, what it's like to serve some of these members. If you are on a board and you say to yourself, understanding the credit union difference is really important, you know, we're going to ask every for this CEO to give us 10 reasons why and how a credit union is different than a bank. And if they can't give you at least 10, you know, thank you, get out of here. And then, but you know who's going to be able to tell you that? People who come up through your organization, the people who've been making those loans. And since 70-80% of the employees in credit unions are already women, then you know we're going to start to see more women at the C-suite level. But our boards need to care about the credit union difference. So that's all I'll say.
Great comments. I want to touch upon the diversity aspect of it and how diversity can help credit unions to bring about change and modernize and to help credit unions propel forward. The pandemic, really accelerated modernization for credit unions and pushed us all forward, such that credit unions, when they didn't have plans, they suddenly found themselves making plans to invest in new technology, like the ITMs, the interactive teller machines, to work with their staff and allow for remote work from home, and to really have us thinking about what do we need to do to help the next generation of leaders. What do we need to do to help younger people, younger professionals to get their work done? And so I want to talk about age diversity and how age diversity can help credit unions to also modernize, if you will. When credit unions boards have a wide generational gap, it can be said that it's the younger volunteers that push for newer technology. It's the younger volunteers that want to talk about social consciousness. And they bring that to the credit union from the top-down perspective as opposed to the normal grassroots, like bottom-up perspective. And so when you think about, at least for me, when I first joined my board, I was 27 as well, finished with school and wrapped up a lot of things in my life, and I brought some new ideas, and I was excited. And the same 300-page board packet, I couldn't believe every month I was getting tons and tons of papers, and I said, this is just ridiculous. And so I asked for a central database, if you will, today would be a cloud, but somewhere that we could access these documents from anywhere. Why should I have to search through 300 pages to find something, and why should I have to figure out who to ask to then find something when I can do a search myself, just type in a keyword kind of thing? And I proposed it, and I, several times, and they said at first, no, we can't do that because of privacy, right? We discussed privacy earlier, how people want to protect people's privacy. And I said, at the very least, I'm asking for what NCUA puts on their website. And so they put information about every credit union on their website, and I said, I want that same information made available to the board members. And they said, we'll look into it, and they did, and it was cheap. At the time, it was like $200, and they made it accessible to everyone. And now we've further graduated years later, now we're using cloud services to have our board packets. And people who didn't really work on computers per se, the iPads and the laptops, they now have to, and they've gotten used to it. So having diverse, younger leaders on your board can help you to modernize and bring about that modernization. So Michael, being that younger person, can you speak a little bit about that as well?
Go ahead. Part of the changes that we've made is we went to a consent agenda. We worked with our CEO on dashboards, and she kind of gives us this look. I think we have 16 dashboards or something, but it helps with that board packet. Are we okay? Are we green? We're good. We're good. We're good. Oh, wait, there's something that's fallen now below. Okay, let's bring it up at the board meeting. So it helps you get through the packet a lot faster. And we use BoardPack, and we can go in there. Our board liaison puts everything in there. So we've got the bylaws, we've got addresses and birthdays, and we get it all. So it's nice to have it all in one area that we can go to at any time. The other thing we did is we set up charters, job descriptions, that's all in there. We went through our 1950 bylaws, which was shocking, and we just switched some words around that meant the same today, but boy, it was pretty crazy back in the 50s when they put it together. But you just got to stay on top of it. Listen to your younger board members. They've got great ideas, and they're fun ideas. You just need to continue to work with everybody involved, and you'll get there. Everybody will get there.
Yeah, and then also, like, you know, it said, like, I'm a millennial, right? We care about things, right? Guess what the credit union does? We care about our members, right? But do you know who your member is, right? Do you know the makeup of your membership, right? I think I've been asking that question for my credit union for about 5 years now, right? Hey, we have all this marketing data, where is it? Right? Okay, well, finally, 3 years later, they're going to give me the data. Okay, cool, but I forgot my question, right? And, you know, there was something important I asked for, you know, and it's really being able to adopt that change. But, you know, when you have that marketing data and you know who your member is, you know the field of membership and you know the makeup, like, right? And then you can build a board off of that. You know, so many times we hear it's a social club, or I brought in my friend, or hey, an open board seat came, oh, I just know this other person, they're interested in joining. It's like, why are they joining? What are they bringing to the table, right? And it doesn't just have to be young, right? It can be just diverse. It could be a membership, hey, you're more Hispanic here. I need this demographic over here. Like, this is my branch over here, right? You know, to get to that, to actually get like that whole perspective of your membership. But yeah, it's gonna cause conflict. Like, I'm not gonna lie. With different voices in the room, you're gonna have you're gonna have a harder discussion. It's not gonna just be a yes board, right? I've seen us get into a trap where it's just been yes. Yes, hey, everyone's friends. We're friends with the CEO. We're friends with all the exec team. We're just going to rubber stamp everything, yes, and then not hold everyone accountable, right? Well, those days have changed because we're getting passed by. And if we want to continue as an industry, we need to hold them accountable, and then we actually need to have that diversity of thought to actually push us forward.
And before we pass it on, I'm just going to ask a question real quick here. And that is, how do you ask somebody to step off so you have that opening?
I mean, there's a couple different ways, right? You could also implement term limits. Granted, people aren't going to term themselves out, right? So that's one thing, is more the fact of like, if you can start having that conversation, or you could put them in an advisory role. Hey, I need your valuable insight over here. Move them over to a different committee. Hey, because like obviously like we know with the CDFIs, like right now you have to have an advisory committee that matches your CDFI. Like we kind of scrambled, we have one, like it works, right? But maybe we say, hey, I need your leadership over here. I know it's going to take your time, right? I'm going to replace you on the board, but I'm going to really value your opinion, right? Moving forward to kind of just help them, and then they get that message.
And I just need to piggyback on what you just said about we can't all be friends, right? I mean, this isn't a social club, even though it may look like a social club at times. And one of the things that I'm seeing, it's really hard to watch a credit union that goes away because everybody was in a social club and they wanted to just go along. And we saw, one of the first things I saw when I got there was a credit union that had to be liquidated because of a fraud. And it turned out that the fraud was perpetrated by somebody that was brought in by a friend on the board and was hired to do some work for them, and had a rap sheet in the next state. And the board members were like, and I guess what I'm saying is that it's the power of one in your credit union, and you are the one. Even if you don't want to be, you have to be the one. If one person had Googled this guy, they would have seen that this person is a bad guy. One person, and the sad part of this was, and it was, you know, I remember telling the vice chair at this point, I said, there's a group of people here who have been with this credit union for 40 years, these board members, who their whole life now is ruined. The rest, all the achievements that they made for this particular credit union in their community is gone because not one of them stepped up and said, well, did we do a background check on the guy that we're giving all this money to? So being able to step back, and one of the things, and I think several boards I've seen do this before, and that is at the end of the board meeting, go around, you know how everybody just stops, you know, after the votes and nobody talks, but to go around after all the votes and saying, well, you know, how do you feel about that? Do you have any other thoughts about this? So what you do is everybody is going to be asked to speak. And I know it's uncomfortable, but everybody's got an opinion. And you know that because when you leave the board meeting, they're all meeting out by the trunk, right? So let's have that conversation in the boardroom. But, you know, if I could tell board members to do anything, is remember, it's the power of one, and you are the one.
Great comments. Looking forward, let's talk a little bit about legacy building. And thinking about the future, we have to think about the legacy that the next generation of leaders will inherit. And for some people, that's just not a hypothetical. It really is real, where they're ordering the steps of like their children and even grandchildren today to hopefully have them engaged in credit unions the next 10, 20 years from now. I think of people like certainly Sue and Brandy, who work together, you know, mother and daughter, and Sue is definitely setting a great example for all of us, but certainly for her daughter and for her children, her other son and her, you know, her grandchildren, who can one day, you know, join the credit unions and, you know, become involved. And they're small children now, but they see what the work that she's doing. They show up, they support her, you know, they're at the events, and so they're very well aware of what's happening. Even Stephen as well, you know, I see him on Facebook. He's posting that during the board meetings, he has a bond and a tradition with his daughter, and they get Starbucks and they talk, and, you know, she's excited now about board meetings because this is connected to her father, and this is like something that she wants to engage with. So when we're thinking about legacy, I mean, for me, my parents, you know, they always relied on the proverb, train up a child in the way he or she should go, and when they're old, they will not depart from it. And so, Roxy, you know, you mentioned that your mother had joined the credit union 50 years ago. Can you talk about inheriting such a legacy, and what are some things to consider when we're really trying to say we want our children to inherit this and to be the next gen leaders?
You know, it used to be culture. We were afraid to bring people on because maybe they didn't fit our culture. Maybe they didn't think like we do. And that is gone. You need to put that behind you and move forward with who can bring what to the board. Who's going to be the best fit? I'm in agriculture by trade, and so I was excited when we brought Sulfa on. She's with the county, but she's with public health. And so that was an area that we've never tackled before, the health of Ventura County. You know, how do you bring, people have to want to help. They have to be passionate about the credit union industry. To be passionate, you have to be taught about it. You have to experience. Take your kids to some things. Let them sit in on some of the meetings. We've got a past board member that her grandson at the age of, I don't know, what was it, 2 or 3 years old, was sitting in on the board meetings because there wasn't a babysitter. Well, he sits on our board now. And he's young and he's enthusiastic and he thinks way faster than I do. You know, you just got to be sure that who you're bringing up, who you're talking to in the schools. We use a lot with our CEO will say, hey, I've met this person, maybe you guys want to talk to them. Our community development that's out there all over the place, use them. Say, hey, who do you know that has come by and talked to you guys about being in the credit union? Give them a call, see what's out there. But be sure to, number one, for me, it's member first. Anything that the staff brings to the board and says, hey, well, what about this? What about this? And the fee's only going to be this. And my CEO knows that she's going to get pushback from Roxy because fees. But these days, it's true. We need to make money any way that we can because it's being taken away from us. The courtesy pay, you know, all of the fees. We have to be more creative. But to bring those young people in, they need to know how we feel about them, how we can help them out in the community. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to go out there and stand on your board and preach about how good the credit union is and how many people we help in our community.
Okay, so that's a great way for us to transition here. I want to make one comment. I made this comment recently about the fact that we have legacy leaders. And there was a day a few years ago when somebody came up to me and said, "Oh, you're Brandy's mom." So there are times in our lives when these transitions happen, and that's what it's all about. People become the leaders. They are the leaders. And so, questions for our panelists? Yes, Brandy.
We couldn't have timed that better. So my question has to do with ensuring or pushing or ensuring accountability at the national level. So we're talking about diversity and next-gen boards at the credit union level. How do we ensure next-gen and diversity at our national associations, at our state leagues and associations, and our QSOs to ensure the boards are the same?
Volunteer.
Yeah, I mean, also, like, it's professional recruiting, right? I mean, I think that that's like the biggest thing. Like, you just named a bunch of things. Do most board members know that those are options and know that they can take their service one extra step? Or, like, you know, one of our credit union executives, like, can actually take that step, right? You know, I think that we really lack professional recruiting in general for board members, but for associations, for everything. And it's really being able to formalize and that nomination process, formalize what that actually looks like to be able to go out in your communities and actually find the people who are actually going to serve and do a good job.
And I would say this, one of the things that, there are a lot of things I'm proud of working at the NCUA, but one of them is its track record with diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you look at the employee mix, if you look at the leadership mix, it's very diverse. And I can relate this in human terms. First time in my 35 years in the credit union movement that I could go by Sarah Bang instead of Sarah Canepa Bang, because nobody said a word about my last name. Every other job I've ever had in the credit union system, I was Bing, Bang, 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 other things, and so I stuck Canepa back in there. But I'm very proud of how NCUA does it, and it's very deliberate. And it's not easy, but it's very deliberate, and it's working.
So, final comments? All right.
Final comments is that, you know, we definitely need to invest in our next generation. We need to be intentional about it. And we can't just rely on the laurels of, like, you know, we do a good thing and, you know, this would be a resume builder for young people and they should be like delighted to come join us. So why aren't they doing it? We have to be more intentional about how we are attracting and retaining the next generation of leadership.
I just want to say, if you're looking for the next generation, these folks have families, they have soccer games, they have softball, they have all these other commitments to their family first. And we understand that. So how best can we entertain those people to come and spend some time with us? It's valuable. It's very valuable time. We don't take anything away from it. But that's a recruiting issue. How do we make it easier for those folks? And gosh knows that Zoom has helped tremendously. But, you know, there's nothing like face-to-face.
Yeah, I'll just take that one step further. Is just know your value proposition. I mean, right? Like, why do you serve? Who do you serve for? Like, and what are they going to get out of that board too? Right? I mean, we're all volunteers here, at least for the board is concerned. Right? We're not getting paid, maybe yet. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. But, you know, it's just more the fact of just make sure that we understand, and for each one of us, what is our value proposition and, you know, what are we giving up for that time?
And the only thing I will say, this has been really fun and I'm very honored to have been on this panel. I will say this, when I'm talking to youngsters out there, the kids, and I tell them what a credit union is, you get this look and they're like, really? If we took the time to really explain to kids, the younger generation, the achievement that you get in your community and your group by serving these humans that need you, because they're not being served. If they were getting served by the banks, they'd be at the bank, but they're not. So the youngsters I sound 65, don't I? But when you explain what a credit union is, just to see the reaction in their faces, and it's like, all right, would you like to serve on the board? When people are excited about it, and young people get excited about credit unions.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. I know somebody texted me, are there breaks? And I said, sure, just get up whenever you need to. We're gonna pace this one. We're gonna end this session today with the concept of the realities. All right? We asked some questions just a minute ago about how do you actually ask somebody to leave the board? I was asked to do that with a credit union that I worked with to support their facilitation of professional development. And when that actually happened and somebody wasn't put on as an incumbent, they said to me directly that this is the worst day of their life. People care. People aren't serving for this number of years because of the fact that this is just something for them to do. They passionately care. So we have to be deliberate, and we have to start getting into these habits. And so that's what we want to talk about now. We want to explore the realities. And then after this session, I know Rafael's here. He's going to come up and talk to you for a few minutes. We're going to rock and roll now, so everybody stretch if you need to, move around if you need to, because I'm going to invite Renee Sadie-White up here. She's the president of AACC, and she's going to kick us off with a panel, and I'm going to grab my panel now because I've got a few new folks here that are going to join us. I'm looking here and I'm saying, okay, realities. We've got the commitment to change, who truly made a difference. Frank from Unitas Credit Union, Community Credit Union, he's going to talk about what he's been seeing not only here but around the world. And let's see, for the first time we have Jorge here from Visa that's going to talk about what's happening with Visa and how this is happening on a larger scale. And I'm looking now for Seth. Where are you, Seth? Come on up here. And he's going to talk about the realities of making sure we're making loans and reaching out to people. So, Renee, rock.
Thank you, Sue. You guys are a good-looking bunch. I'm going to get Sue mad at me. Everybody, please stand up. Please stand up. Reach to the top. I need the energy. Reach to the top. One more time. Side. On the side. On the other side. If you can bend down. No, don't bend down. All right, that's good. Let me first say that last panel was phenomenal. And Sue, anybody who was here at this underground collision, we will give a discount for board training, for CU board training and 501c3 nonprofit training. So we'll get with you and Zach to do something with that. I think it's important. I am a DE, so I have the best panel ever. I don't think that it's any accident that Sue put me with the best men in the room. So, having said that, I'm so excited because when we had our pre-con meeting, because I'm that control freak, I want the guys to know exactly what I wanted them to do, and they all looked at me and said, we are leaders, we're going to do what we want to do. So, having said that, Frank, I'm going to ask you to start letting us know what you all do at your credit unions that makes it a diverse credit union.
We've done a number of things. I think our credit union board is really progressive. They've introduced, we've got term limits. We also have, and this has been, I know, hugely controversial, compensation. But when you're asking a young person to give up time, and they have fiduciary responsibilities as a board member as well, and you're asking them to take vacation time to go to a conference, I think it's an acknowledgement. I mean, I do have a coach bag, and I get about that at conferences all the time. But it's not a compensation that I'm driving a Tesla or anything like that. It's just an acknowledgement of the amount of time and work that board members put in. I loved the last panel. The last panel was fabulous. They had some great ideas. I know some of the things that we do is controversial. I prepared a statement, and Renee rolled her eyes, so I'm going to stay away from it. But one of the things that I think... Do you want to hear it? Okay. Here we go, because I have it on the teleprompter. Yeah. Our nation is becoming more diverse every year. To be certain you are fulfilling your mission to serve everyone in your community equitably, it is essential that your organization reflects this diversity. Besides that, it makes your organization stronger, better, and more nimble. When we talk about diversity, this doesn't just mean people of color. It includes LGBTQ plus people, gender, age, people with disabilities, anyone who could be excluded for a variety of reasons. Board diversity. Modeling a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion begins with leadership, with your board. Your board and C-suite must actively and strategically recruit and include diverse people for your board and the pipeline that leads to your board. This process to find skillful, quality, qualified people who are diverse can be hard work and a complex process. Looking at influential organizations that support people of color in your community is a great place to start looking for potential board members. Recruit them, value them, use their skills to enhance your board. Some credit unions have put a person of color on their board without proper onboarding and preparing the organization to welcome them. Those new board members can feel isolated. In many cases, their service is brief and often followed by a resignation. C-suite diversity. If you already haven't done so, now is the time to establish a pipeline to start filling C-suite positions. Like recruiting for the board, this also takes real work, a commitment to mentoring and monitoring. It is important to create situations so that your candidates are provided with educational, meaningful experiences. Ensuring their success leads to the success of the organization. Remember hearing the words, we're looking for a person with more experience. How do people get the experience if no one takes the chance with you and provides you with the experiences? Membership and staff diversity. One reason credit unions were established was to provide financial services for people who are underbanked. Communities of color are often underbanked. Yet in order to bring them into your organization, it is important to establish a trust relationship so that you can become a trusted financial partner. When a person of color comes to your credit union, consider whether they see someone that looks like and speaks like themselves. Consider whether they feel comfortable, safe, and welcomed. The same with your employees. Go beyond simply translating your website. For example, we at Unitas participate as active members of different communities, sponsoring and supporting many events central to those communities and their activities. Be authentic with the groups of people you are attracting is important. Learn their culture. Create products and services that fulfill their needs. Once you're on this road, create an ecosystem that supports diversity and inclusion beyond your credit union. Work with vendor partners that support and model DEI. Creating an equitable organization where more people have the opportunity to participate will make the work you do stronger and better. Our credit union mantra is people helping people. It's not people helping some people.
Not rolling my eyes at all. Good job, good job. So Jorge, we've talked a lot about what you do at Visa. Yes. I have one question for you. What are you most proud of that you're doing?
Well, following the teleprompter, the one thing that I'm really proud about that I've done and that we've done as an organization is, so I cover the Southeast region for community banks and credit unions. I have 1,100 customers in the 7 states of the Southeast. My proudest accomplishment is that a company as large as Visa has a guy named Jorge covering the Southeast. I don't think that that would have been a thing at some point in time, and I'm not the only one. There are 7 peers of mine that cover the rest of the region. We are 5 out of 8 female. We are 1 out of the 8 female and Black. We are 2 out of the 8 LGBT. So we cross all of the segments that the country crosses and represent Visa in the way that I think that it should be done, which is as a mimic of who our customers are and the country and the market that we cover. So that is my proudest thing. It's not something that I did, but it's something that I push every day as who I am and what I do at Visa.
Okay, thank you. Seth, tell me about what you do and why.
All right. For those of you that were at Financial Health Network Emerge just a couple weeks ago, they released their latest data. Their latest data shows that for the first time in 5 years, the average health of Americans got worse. In fact, the stat now is more than 2 out of every 3 Americans are financially unhealthy. And those are the Americans that are the members of our credit unions. Right? Not only that, but 1 in 10 of our members are credit invisible, meaning they don't have enough of a credit file to generate a credit score so you can give them traditional lending. And then let's not even talk about the fact that we have a nation full of immigrants that do not have social security numbers, that need to get lending and need to get help during life events. And yet, unless we have something that doesn't use a FICO score, we've got nothing for them. And when we talk about those unhealthy Americans, it is more disproportionate to people of color and to underbanked groups like single moms who have under nothing from what they did, their credit score does not qualify them for traditional lending. And so if we know these things, and we know that Payment.com just came out and said 61% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and that's independent of socioeconomic status. So it doesn't matter how much you make. It could be 6 figures, it could be 5 figures, it could be 4 figures. You're living paycheck to paycheck. And so what are we as credit unions doing to support that kind of diversity in our membership base? How are we going beyond the traditional FICO score lending to be able to make sure when somebody has a life event where they have a need that we can actually meet that need? And not only meet that need, but meet it in the time frame when they're actually experiencing the need. And that's what I love about the panels we've heard so far today. You know, we've heard about technology and how credit unions can use technology to solve those needs. We've heard about the moral dilemma and how we as credit unions, not just what they talked about, but how are we servicing that single mom? How are we servicing immigrants? How are we servicing people that don't have qualifying credit scores, but they are actually a low risk? And just because they don't have the score doesn't mean they don't have the need. Right? How are we doing that? And then how are we practicing diversity? How are we making sure that we have products that support the people who need that the most? What are we doing for those people that are workers in the gig economy? What are we doing for that Amazon driver or distribution center worker? Right? And that's where I think the idea of going beyond traditional FICO lending, going into new ways of thinking about things, and And look, one of the things that I loved is when we opened up this session today, somebody actually said Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, what a flashback to high school, right? But the reality is that is true, and it's just as true today. So when I sit on panels like this and when I talk to executives, the number one thing I hear is, well, we have trained our staff to give financial counseling to our members. And that's a really great step. But if that member can't put food on their table, if they can't fix their car to go to work the next day, if they can't get the medicine for their kids, they don't want to hear about your financial counseling, right? They want to hear how you're going to help them through this life event. And so I think, and that's what what I get up every single day and have the privilege and honor to do, is to partner with credit unions to help them help their members get the help they need in the midst of that life event. So Renee, that's what I do.
Wow. I believe it was Jeff who talked about Maslow. I was at that underground, my very first, and I was so impressed. I think you talked about mental health then as well, with your son. Yeah, it was phenomenal. And my session that I got to do with Linda Bodie and Monica was about belonging. And that's what this is about: diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. I want us all to remember that diversity doesn't mean race. Doesn't mean the color of my skin. It's so much more. So with that, what I heard from all three of you is being intentional. Being intentional. So at your shops, what's the first thing that comes to mind when what you guys are doing for your members? What's the first thing that comes to mind in being intentional?
I think at Unitas what we do is we really try to reach out. We really try to be part of that community. We have advisory committees, we have people that are feeding us information that say, you're thinking of it from the wrong perspective because you're not speaking to our community. And so they give us advice as to, okay, how do we change the wording so that way we are part of the community? And one thing that I'm really proud of is Unitas does a lot of sponsoring as far as events that they do. And we are, just Labor Day weekend, we did a thing called the Barbara Leonard Service Day. We had 250 people that volunteered their time with 15 nonprofit organizations. And, you know, that's reaching out to them. Don't just expect them to come to us. You know, Seth was talking about, you know, the people that 60% of the people are living paycheck to paycheck. And at our board, oftentimes I'll say, you know, 60% of the people, if they have a $400 emergency, they have to sell something. And so we got to keep that perspective constantly at the boardroom in particular as to how do we help our members, because 60% of our members are in that basket, you know. Yeah, and so I mean, we've got to find ways to. One of the big things that I don't mean to go off on a tangent. One of the big things that I was really pushing, and still am really pushing, is the Open Your Eyes, because we have 7% of the financial market. Why are we fighting as credit unions for that 7%? Why are we not fighting for that 93%? I think it's communications. I think it's education. I think one of the strongest things that we can do is educate. And being an educator, former educator, that's why I believe that. But I think that's our strength, is that we can educate people.
Okay.
So it's a little different for Visa. Obviously, we don't have members. Our members are you, the credit unions and the other FIs in the space that are our clients. So for what stands out to me, with first thing I think about intentionality in this role is we think about being a thought leader and a challenger. So in a lot of ways, we're coming into the room with resources and scale that we can bring to the forefront, but my job is not to be a vendor who pats you on the back and agrees with everything that you do. My job as your partner is to challenge you where you may not be getting it right, and to challenge each other, hopefully, when we don't get it right either. I'll give you a very specific example. It's no one in this room. I have a client in the Southeast who has never signed a contract with Visa, and they are very large. So they are getting no incentives from us. They are getting no discounts from us. They are a very profitable customer to Visa. If my job is to preserve and grow the business, I would let this person stay the way that they are. But my job is not to do that. And it's a very specific kind of challenge that we had. The challenge was sign a contract with us, and for all these reasons, you should. And the feedback I got was, you guys are doing a lot of stuff that I don't agree with in the LGBT space. I don't want to be a part of that. I don't agree with it. And so, again, in the challenge sort of conversation, it was to be, well, I have to tell you that I put politics and social values aside. That is wrong for your business. And I'll tell you why. 33% of Gen Z and 20% of millennials abandon brands that don't have values that align with them. You want to fight for the other 93%? It's my job to challenge you, not on social or moral reasons, but on business reasons. You are making a bad move. And you should sign a contract with us. And the things that we're doing in that space are all about building a business that's sustainable and also adhering to good business practices, good moral practices too. But my job as your partner is to challenge you and tell you that you are wrong.
Wow. I say wow a lot, right? Wow. So Seth, 5 years from now, what does what your organization has done look like? What have you solved?
That's a great question, Renee. Thank you. So let's talk about today so I can talk about the future. A couple years ago, there was a study done that said there are only 15 states in the entire United States that have more McDonald's than predatory lending storefronts. Let's say it another way. There are 35 states in the United States that have more predatory lending storefronts than McDonald's, right? 5 years from now, I want there to be no predatory lending storefronts because the credit union industry is meeting their members' needs. When I talk to credit union leaders and we talk about how you can use technology so that your members can get a loan from any place at any time on any device without using a biased FICO score, they go, we already do that. In fact, our program is so popular that around Christmas and Black Friday, we have lines out the door to our branch. And I go, if you've got lines in your branch, you're not doing it, right? The people have to wait in line to get help and hope that there's somebody available when we can use technology and make that happen today to where they can do it from their car, from their home, from the store, right? Why would you want them to wait in line? Think about your days at Disney. That's not enjoyable days, right? So why would you want your members to go to Credit Union Disney and wait in line so they can get a couple $100 loan, right? That's what QCash does. Like, we help credit unions. And so 5 years from now, I don't want there to be a predatory lending storefront because all of those members are getting the help they need at the credit union. And what's amazing is when you help those members during that life event, several things happen. Number one, they become more sticky to your credit union because you helped them when they had a need. They're not going to forget that. And their loyalty and their using of more products at your credit union is astronomical. Number two, they're going to tell their friends. And their friends are going to come and want to know why this credit union isn't just in the community, but they're making an impact in that community. And then number three, the amount of lives that you're going to change because you helped them when nobody else would. You kept them out of a path of financial destruction and brought them into the credit union onto a path of financial wellness. I know my friend Denise Wymore is in this room, and we have a saying at QCash thanks to her. And that saying is, I may not be able to change the world, but I can change one person's world. And that's what we can do in 5 years.
Thank you for that complete answer. I like that. So Frank, you gave up the 7%. So if there's 93%, how do we go for it?
Well, I think it's education. I've heard I really got involved with credit unions about 7 years ago. And the first conference I went to, they said that most of the people don't even know what a credit union is. And Sarah just said, a lot of the credit union people don't even know what a credit union is. But the thing is, you know, a lot of the general populace think that we're a labor union. You know, I mean, it's just, you know, so how do we educate them? You know, I mean, how do we, if we educate the 93, I don't want to say 93%, but the general populace, we'll have people beating down our doors, I think.
Excluding you. Seth, you said that the predatory lending, right? So what if we went after that? What would that look like? So I don't want McDonald's anymore. I want credit unions on every corner and maybe fintech credit unions. What do we do?
Yeah, honestly, you're not going to be able to do it with brick and mortar storefronts. You're going to be able to do it using technology, right? And so if you want to put them out of business and you want to be the true PFI for your members, it's embrace fintechs, right? QCash is a fintech. We are a QSO and we only partner with credit unions because we're passionate about the credit union space. But it's using that technology to reach your members where they're at. Right? The idea that they have to walk into a branch to do banking. Here, I'll give you a great example. I recently moved to Tennessee, and there's a very large credit union there that I tried to open an account in. I couldn't do it online because one of my bureaus into the branch. I was there for over an hour and a half. So Chris, your example was actually really good at 45 minutes. And they wanted to pull a 3B just to allow me to give them money. And they couldn't pull the 3B because one of my bureaus was locked. They could only pull a 2B. That wasn't good enough. I couldn't give them money. I walked out, right? And so how do we make these experiences digital? How do we make sure that a member from any place, on any device, from anywhere, from any place, any device, anywhere, can get that help they need? And how do we do it in a way, because number one, we have to do it responsibly. We can't give members a loan they can't pay back, right? So we have to mitigate risk because at the end of the day, we are nonprofit, for-profit institutions, right? We're in the business of not going out of business is what I'm trying to say. And so there are QSOs and there are technologies that you can use to deliver that and make that happen for your members. And again, most of you, if not all of you, have mobile apps. You have banking cores, right? You've got the technology. Now it's just finding the right partner that helps you use the technology you already have to accomplish that mission.
Can I jump in? I'll just add 15 seconds of, I think payment, he's exactly right, and payment is a great way to do that. You can differentiate. There's a lot of mobile and digital technology that stands up strongly in payments. But what you're going to see, I would challenge you all to engage in a broad money movement conversation around payments, not just a card, and how do you make that digital, but broad money movement. And what you'll see in the future, as we predict, is brands in the payment sort of transaction will fall into the background. So this is true of Visa, this is true of the brands represented in this room, that as these technologies stand up, the brands that we represent will be second thought, not primary thought. But payments is a great way, and connectivity with fintechs is a great way to play when you're in the background, as well as defend when you're in the foreground.
If I can add on something as well. You know, you've got to work with, I think you've got to work with the people with tremendous empathy. A lot of the reasons why they go to these day lenders is because they, at least what I've heard, is that they don't get this guilt put on them. And so I think you've got to reach them where they're at.
Okay, Seth, not you this time. It's going to be Jorge. So Jorge, you did really well with explaining to this person, this probably large credit union, that they were missing out. So I want you to tell everybody where they're missing out. What are the three things that Visa does that really helps credit union to get better?
Well, in this specific case, you know, one of the things that he was absolutely missing out was because you were focused on this one thing that Visa also does happen to support, you were missing out on the rest of the family. On the top three, you know, first, we have a broad community investment fund that is part of all of the initiatives that we sign with credit unions that goes either to the foundation or direct to the credit union, that you can steer into whatever you like. And Visa doesn't brand, Visa does not control. You don't even have to put the fact that Visa provided the money. You do whatever you like with it. This gentleman who is out there talking about how important his state is and how important his members in walked away from funding for that foundation. A second, I think very important to all of us in this space is digital transformation. We're a partner that can help play with the multiple entities that sit out there. So whether it's APIs into some of the fintechs, whether it's fintechs that we've acquired ourselves, whether it's technology that we've built or that we've co-built with Accor, these are things that we can bring, and they are translated and easier to plug in rather than build yourself or acquire yourself or create a new QSO to provide yourself. So this person was also stepping away from that. And I think third, honestly, it's less to do with Visa and more to do with just the future of the business. Aligning yourself with brands that align with your values and the values of the market that you're trying to serve is future-proofing your business. I would say that that's number one on the list of any CEO, and unfortunately, I'd suggest that this CEO missed it. I would be his partner to challenge him, and it will continue to challenge him in that way. He's closing the door on the only growing segment of the population, which is Gen Z, and aligning himself with the declining segments of the population.
Thank you for that. Seth, Gen Z, credit scores, do they care?
They actually do care because a lot of them don't have qualifying credit scores. A lot of the Gen Z, they don't believe in debt. And that's one of the reasons why when we talked earlier about buy now, pay later, that was a great marketing exercise in it's not debt, it's smoothing out your payments, right? Well, once you have 5 buy now, pay laters, it's debt, right? And so, you know, the reality is they do care because they don't want to be in debt. They want to have financial freedom. And credit scores matter, but the way you build a credit score is by going into debt and paying that debt off and doing the right things. I'll give you a great example of why credit score matters. When I moved, I had to do a renovation on my house in order to be able to move into it. So I thought I was going to be really smart and use a credit card to pay for a $30,000 renovation because I wanted the points. Well, I didn't get, it was Visa, thank you. I did not get to pay it off before the credit card reported my balance change, which is normally $1,000 to $2,000 because I pay it off every month, to $30,000. That one transaction lowered my credit score 140 points. Now, I have an over 800 credit score, so it put me in a very poor range. All because I did a remodel on my house. I was able to pay it off. I had the money. I got it when I closed on the house. They paid me for it. But that's why credit scores are so bad when it comes to judging somebody and their ability to repay that loan. And so Gen Zs and millennials, they don't know the intricacies of credit score. They don't know the fact that there's no such thing as a FICO score. There are 60-something FICO scores. And which one is it when you're getting the loan? Well, if you're getting a car, it's one, a mortgage another, a general health, and then let's talk about Vantage scores. Is it Vantage 3? Is it Vantage 4? Right? That's confusing, but to say, I use relational underwriting, I actually look at this member and know this member digitally better than I ever knew them when they were just a person in my credit union, and based on that relationship, I can underwrite and do it objectively and in a safe manner. That you can do all day long.
Before I take questions, if there's questions in the audience, I have one question left for you. What's one story that would motivate the rest of us that has helped with you guys' diversity, equity, and inclusion?
I can tell you two quick, very quick stories. So I'll tell you the more recent one. We get it wrong sometimes, and we're in the same boat as many other organizations that we get conversations about diversity and inclusion really wrong. I was recently in a room with our credit team. They were saying, let's focus on building, how do we build credit to be more attractive among community organizations that maybe have always dabbled in debit, don't really talk about credit, so how do we do that? And the conversation went full throttle into more rewards, premium travel. These folks want to get rewards. You get them from Chase, you get them from these other places, and that's how you get them. And the conversation went full tilt for quite a while. And I was the only one in the room that said, I think that the segment of customers you're talking about already use credit and you're just trying to overpay to move from column A to column B, the person that we don't have is going to maybe take one trip in their life that is a premium rewards trip. It'll be to Hawaii, not to Morocco, and it'll be for their honeymoon. So and everyone sort of sat silently back and said, you're right, we're surrounded by people that all look and act the same. We need to challenge ourselves. So we do get it wrong. Thankfully, that's in the workroom rather than the Wall Street. A second story is a personal one. It's way at the beginning. So this inspires me. It's why I came into the segment. It's why I really am passionate about what I do. So my family, I'm Cuban. My family got started in this country with a community organization. So it was a small credit union in Hialeah. Unfortunately, it's no longer around. Hialeah is a town in Miami. And they got the education on how it works in the United States. They got the small business loan when they launched a company. My dad financed his first architectural firm through the credit union. They both paid for college through the credit union. So that inspires me every day. If you ever talk to me on Zoom, and now we know everybody's living room situation, in my background, it's photos of all of them and how they got started in this country. So every single day, I wake up and am inspired by that story.
Thank you. Frank?
From the Unitas' perspective, we work really hard as far as strategically trying to fill a board position. We really take a look at, okay, we set up a matrix as far as skills and things that we want on a board. And so we really follow that. Just one quick funny story. When I was onto the board, I think I was probably about 60, 61. I was probably one of the younger people on the board. And I went over to the Vienna World Conference, and I was with another board member, and we went to this plaza that we're taking tours out of this plaza. And so I turned to this board member and I said, do you think that group over there is the credit union tour? And they said, no, too young. So you know, I mean, we've really worked hard at it. We have 7 members on our board, 4 are women, 3 guys, 1 Chinese, 1 Hindu Indian, 1 Hispanic. We've got, we've got diversity, I think, really well, considering we're a small board. We could expand the diversity if we enlarge the board, but you want to have some flexibility as well. So, but that's what we do.
Seth?
So we allow members to opt in and tell their stories to us through their credit unions. And I'll share a 30-second version of Deanne's story. Deanne is a member at Washington State Employees Credit Union, had an allergic reaction to her diabetic medication, had to take an ambulance ride from Eastern Washington to Western Washington. After she got cleared from the hospital, the ambulance showed up and wanted to be paid for that ambulance ride immediately. Her response was, I did not have the money and I did not have any family. But Washington State Employees Credit Union, through offering a loan through QCash, I was able to get the help I needed. And her words were, the credit union was my family, right? And that resonates with me. I hope it resonates with you. Meet your members' needs because you're their family.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody have any questions for the esteemed gentleman here? Any questions? Okay, Sue's gone. Maybe we can take a break.
I'm here. I'm here. Remember, never nobody here. So, come on. We don't have any questions. Everybody has raised their hand so far. So, Renee, since you've moderated, let me throw this back to you. Okay. What have you? We've been on a journey for a couple years, right? Do you have a story of a credit union that has taken the model, has embraced ACUC, and has seen change in their community, has brought about a difference with their members?
So you know I'm going to put somebody on the spot, right?
Yep.
So, Schools First Federal Credit Union, they had an issue. I got so mad. Somebody complained that they didn't have any diversity on the board. Well, Kevin Martin asked me to come out and do a little talk with Victor Coro from Coopera. And so I came out, and Kevin said, well, you know, it would be really good for our board and our volunteers to see how we have diversity at ACUC. And so I said, okay. And I looked at the slides, and all I could do was, we have a AAC's African American Hall of Fame. And so in that African American Hall of Fame, we do have people, I like to say this, my sisters and brothers of a lighter hue, not just African Americans. And so I couldn't show the pictures, so what I did was I showed the names and people who were not black, I put them in white. Well, as I turned to the next page, my board of directors were all black except for one, and he calls himself the salt and the pepper. So the same problem that Schools First was being accused of, we looked the same as well. It was reverse. So our journey as well, ACUC, we are inclusive as heck, because if the credit union system is mostly not black, then my members are mostly not black. But because we have the African American Credit Union Coalition name, it sounds as if we're exclusive. We're not, we're very inclusive. But what I learned from that, and what I loved about what Schools First did, one, in bringing Victor and I in, to make it understandable, to make you see what is the difference. And in doing so, having that conversation, reminding me, oh my God, we've got the same issues. And so now I had to go back to my board and say, guys, we are the leaders in diversity, equity, and inclusion having this conversation, but our board isn't diverse. What was great about our board, though, and the same with Schools First, is that we had diversity of thought. We had small credit unions, we had vendors, we had women, we had men. And I'm happy to say, Frank, when I came on board at AACC, when I came back to AACC in 2014, the youngest board member was 60. I'm happy to say that I have some under 40s on the board now. So that's my story, Zach.
Okay, well, I am going to thank you all very much. We appreciate your time, because we're going to stretch a little bit here, and we're going to then ask our friend from Poland to come up and speak to all of you. So stretch for a minute. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. All right, let's take a seat. We're about ready to move to the next phase here, but I really want everybody's attention, and that's why I had you stretch. So as we all kind of come together here, I want to share a little story, and if you'll go ahead and take a seat. For many of you, you're aware that I'm on the board and have worked with World Council very closely. In 2017, we did a project engagement where we went to Ukraine, and we traveled, and we had an opportunity to meet the people. We had an opportunity to see their hard work in rebuilding a credit union system. And for those of you that have never done a project engagement out in the field in another country, I would implore all of you to take advantage of that. Then we were all at GAC in February. We talked about Maslow's. We talked about everything that's taking place. And something happened while we were there. Russia invaded Ukraine. And I was sitting in my hotel room, and I looked out the window, and you know that the underground is at Hay Adams, which overlooks the White House. And we saw people gathering, and people protesting, and people coming in with their flags. And I grabbed Zach, and I said, let's go down. Let's go be part of this. And at that moment, I realized that we are a global community. We are people helping people around the world. So when we came back from DC, my grandson was working on his junior achievement project. And I said, will you create a video about what's going on in Ukraine? And I want to take a minute and show you this 2-minute, or I think 1-minute video. So if you can look at the cameras for a second. So we were talking earlier about generational commitment, and someone asked me, why do you do what you do? Because I have to. And we reached out, and we, a group with Brian Branch and others that Rafael will now tell you, we reached out and we said, we've got 3.5 million people that are refugees that are leaving Ukraine and they're going into Poland. And we have a strong credit union system in Poland. Can credit unions help credit unions directly? And Rafael said yes. All right? And so I've asked him to come, and Connecta was kind enough to help support him being here. And he's going to talk about a couple of things. One, what is going on today, because we have a tendency to have war fatigue or fatigue over whatever the news is. So we want to know what's going on today. And we also want to know what the Polish credit unions are doing for the Ukrainian refugees, which primarily are women and children, all right, within Poland, all right, because of our American help. So, Rafael, will you tell us?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation for this great conference. I'm very glad that I can share with you some information from almost from the front line. It's not easy to talk about the situation in Ukraine. I came from Poland to tell you a story, a dramatical story, but at the end with an optimistic idea. Let me start from political and military situation. 240 days of war in Ukraine. Massive destruction and drama of the entire nation. Over 7 million refugees arrived to Poland, but the flow of refugees across the border goes both ways and depends on the war situation. The Polish government has created very good conditions for staying in Poland, opportunity to work, go to school, healthcare, and free public transport, and much more. There are no refugee camps in Poland. They stay in Polish homes, training and recreation centers, and in houses and flats they rent. In view of the defeats at the front, Russia is threatening again and again with the use of nuclear or chemical weapons. He is constantly trying to destroy the nuclear power plant in Zaporozhye to lead to radioactive contamination, almost for the whole country, maybe for the whole region. 2 weeks ago, an agreement was reached between dictators from Russia and Belarus. Under this agreement, the Belarusian troops were handed over to Putin's orders. Currently, more units of the Russian army are moving to the territory of Belarus and joining Lukashenko's troops. There is concern that these forces will attack Ukraine again from the north. Of course, there is also a fear that they will be directed to the Baltic countries and to my country, Poland. In Poland, we are not waiting with folded arms for these bastards from Russia. We have a stronger and stronger army thanks to the purchases of military equipment in the United States, Great Britain, and South Korea. We are also part of the NATO alliance, and over 10,000 American soldiers are stationed in Poland. Thank you for that, America. Let me say a little bit about establishing of the Via Stella Foundation. Russia renewed its attack on Ukraine on February 24. Already in March this year, two wonderful people, Brian Branch and Bruce Falk, came to Poland to see the situation caused by the war in Ukraine and the situation of refugees in Poland. They did so in order to launch a great initiative to create a foundation that, in cooperation with National Association and Polish credit unions, will help Ukrainian citizens in the best possible way using funds from the United States and other countries. The foundation was named Via Stella, named by Brian Branch, and is now operating at full scale. Detailed information is available on its website. The foundation is supported by National Association employees for charity, and its management board is me and my colleague from the management board, Małgorzata Gac. I also donated our foundation, and this money is to cover petty, very low administrative costs, less than $100 to date. This model ensures that all funds paid to the foundation by donors are not charged with any costs. We allocate 100% to aid. How we help? As part of the foundation, we run several main programs. Refugees who rent flats in Poland can count on our support. We offer support to everyone who joins the program in the amount of about $2,000 paid in equal installments over a period of 6 months. The condition is to open an account in credit union, to which we transfer money for support every month. The second program is the purchase of ambulances for Ukraine, because some of the funds from the United States were allocated to such a specific purpose. We check and buy ambulances, working with paramedics to ensure that right quality equipment. In addition, we buy specialized equipment for these ambulances, and recently also food and, for example, diapers. So far, we have acquired 5 ambulances. 2 of them are already in Ukraine. The third will be delivered to the Children's Hospital in Lviv next week. We are going there with Bruce and Brian. 2 more will go to Ukraine in the next 2 or 3 weeks. The third program, which is in the phase of preparing medical facilities, is health prophylaxis for women from Ukraine who stay in Poland. Preventive and screening tests, as well as emergency care, are our goals. The assistance is provided by facilities and doctors associated with Polish credit unions. The most important of the remaining program in progress. Purchase of school kits for refugee children who go to Polish schools. Purchase of food for 6 months for the center with 93 orphans from Ukraine. Assistance in the purchase of agricultural machinery in cooperation with CAP project, in which World Council of Credit Unions and USAID are also involved. Over a dozen transports of food, clothing, medicaments, as well as sleeping bags, binoculars, or batteries. I am here as a living and eyewitness to this project and its active participant. I am here to ask for your further support because the needs are huge. The scale of the destruction is unimaginable, and the reconstruction of Ukraine and thus the refugees stay in Poland will last a long time. Thank you so much, Susan. Thank you, Kinecta Credit Union. Thank you, Stephen, and your credit union, to making it possible for me to come here and submit this information directly to you. I brought with me leaflets with a QR code for our website. In the digital age, these brochures may look a bit old school, but they carry an important message. Thank you. Thank you for the help and support for my country. Thank you for the help and support my country is experiencing from the American people. Without you, this project would not exist. We are all part of the great family of credit unions, and what we are talking about now is perhaps the most beautiful embodiment of the principle people helping people. Thank you for your attention.
Wow. So we go from this to the fact that, you know, Bill Cheney's here, Stephen's here, I'm here. We represent and are part of the Worldwide Foundation. We believe in credit unions. This foundation was set up by Poland to work directly within Poland for the Ukrainian refugees that have now moved there. And when he talked about, or escaped there, when he talked about the numbers, Poland has a total population of 36 million?
38.
38 million, and they've had a 10% or more increase in the number of people right in their country. So, the children from Ukraine got together and they sent pictures, and they gave those pictures to Bruce and to Brian and to Rafael to bring to us. And they sent them in a package to me. And for those of you that were on our original broadcast, that was just a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks within the invasion when we broadcast back to you. But this particular one I wanted to tell you about. This is from the kids. The bottom is from the kids, all right, in Ukraine. The top one is from Ms. Tibbs' class, kindergartners in Boulder City. she brought them together last week, and she said, as you go out to think about Halloween and celebration and candy and all the joy of the holidays, I want you to also think about children of the world and draw some pictures. And they did. So when you go for your first cocktail, all right, and we enjoy ourselves, in that room back there is a display of all of the kids' pictures. And if you want to bid, please do. There's no pressure here. He did come all the way from Poland. Okay. So I just want you to know the underground is about tackling stuff. And it's not always politically correct, all right? But neither is life. And there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, and the system in Poland is strong. And this is the first time they've ever set up a foundation, and it's specifically being used for the kids. So, thank you, Rafael, before we make our final comments here, but we appreciate you being here very much, okay? Thank you. All right, he is going to be staying here, and you'll all get a chance to spend some time with him. And obviously, I'm a wreck, so it's very important now that we transition to the next phase. And so I am going to ask Brandy Stankovic to come up here and tell you what we're doing next. Thank you, Brandy.
Hello. Let's give one more round of applause for today and the speakers.
To have Miss Renee Sattywhite. Will you stand up, please? Because she is also on the Worldwide Foundation Board, and we're just so excited that I'm looking in this room. So, never to be left out. Thank you.